Chapter 719. The Soaring Dragon Realm was not as vast as the 9 states, but there were many forces of different sizes. A total of 984 sects had participated in the attack on the Heaven Canyon sect. Tens of thousands of cultivators had gathered, led by the 3 overlord sections. However, more than half of them had been killed in the battle below the canyon. Those who were still alive were fleeing like stray dogs. The Blood Tribe cultivators and the remaining members of the Heaven Canyon sect who had joined the Blood Tribe were in hot pursuit. In Lu Ye's field of vision, colorful lights were rushing toward the Medicine Valley. They arrived in front of him in an instant. "Is that 6th Yi?" The leader was a man in a long robe and a silk headscarf. He looked like a scholar at first glance. He was the current dean of the Howran Academy, Yuan Changxuan. He had already heard about the situation in the Medicine Valley from Huang Liang, so he naturally knew about Lu Ye's existence. He also knew that the Alliance army had to rely on Lu Ye's strength if they wanted to survive. The reason he came here first was to communicate with Lu Yi. "That's right," Lu Yi replied. As he spoke, Yuan Changxuan had already arrived in front of Lu Yi. He sized him up and saw that Lu Ye's expression was calm, as if he could remain calm even if a mountain collapsed in front of him. Yuan Changxuan secretly praised him and sighed in his heart. He had heard of the domineering saber mountain villa. Yi Ying's domineering saber technique was quite famous in the Soaring Dragon realm. However, he did not expect Yi Ying's 6th son to be so capable. According to some of the information that Huang Liang had passed on to him, Yi Ying was also very important and faintly thought of him as the savior of the world. Yuan Changxuan did not care whether Yi Ying was the savior of the world or not. Only those who could survive today would have the right to talk about their future. "I'll have to trouble you next." Yuan Changxuan nodded slightly at Lu Yi. "Let them enter the valley." Yuan Changxuan immediately turned around and shouted, "Quickly enter the valley." As soon as he finished speaking, streaks of light flew past the 2 of them and rushed into the Medicine Valley, merging into the colorful flowers in the valley. Most of the cultivators didn't know about the mysteries of the Medicine Valley. They had witnessed the changes under the ravine with their own eyes and witnessed the treachery and power of the blood race. At this moment they were all uneasy. Even if they entered the Medicine Valley, they didn't feel too safe. However, all the cultivators had already received the news that the Medicine Valley was enveloped by a shocking formation. This was their last hope. Whether they could escape this calamity depended on the outcome of the upcoming battle. "Little friend, go ahead and get ready. I'll bring up the rear," Yuan Changxuan said while holding the long sword in his hand. Lu Yi nodded, turned around and retreated into the valley. As they fled, more and more cultivators were killed by the Blood Tribe and the remnants of the Heavenly Gorge sect. Corpses fell to the ground and blood splattered everywhere. Fortunately, the Allied army had a large number of people. Although the vampires were strong, it wasn't that easy to wipe them out. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, all of the fleeing Soaring Dragon cultivators had entered the valley. More than half of the pursuing Blood Tribe and Heavenly Gorge sect members had also entered the valley. In an instant, fights broke out everywhere in the valley filled with birds and fragrant flowers. Only after all of the Blood Tribe members had entered the valley did Lu Yi channel his spiritual power into the formation jade pendant in his hand. In an instant, the clouds and mist in the valley churned. An extremely dense sea of fog appeared out of nowhere, enveloping the entire valley in an airtight mist. "There's a formation." Only now did the Blood Tribe members realize something was amiss. Cries of surprise rang out. Many of the Blood Tribe members instinctively soared into the sky, trying to escape the range of the formation. However, they had only flown a few feet into the air when they felt as if a huge mountain was crashing down from above, preventing them from flying any higher. Flight restriction formation. Many of the aggressive Blood Tribe members were finally shocked. They had never imagined that a place like the Soaring Dragon realm would have something like a flight restriction formation. They were shrouded in fog, unable to determine their direction, and unable to fly into the sky. They had become the trapped party. At the same time, the Soaring Dragon cultivators were also at a loss as to what to do. This was because the enemies before them had suddenly been enveloped by thick fog, and they couldn't see any trace of them. The surrounding scenery had also completely disappeared, and the many sounds of fighting had also fallen silent. It was as if they were the only ones left between heaven and earth. In the fog, Lu Yichuan gasped for breath. In the previous battle, many of his fellow disciples had died. He was lucky enough to escape, but he was also injured. When he fought with a Blood Tribe member just now, he almost died at the other party's hands. The Soaring Dragon realm had never dealt with the Blood Tribe, so they were completely unaware of their methods. This was also part of the reason why they were defeated under the Heavenly Ravine. The Blood Tribe's many secret techniques were extremely strange, and their blood was very corrosive. Whether it was the spirituality of spirit weapons or protective spiritual power, the blood could corrode them. Therefore, in the process of fighting with the Blood Tribe, many soaring dragon cultivators were at a disadvantage because of this. As the fog churned, the enemy in front of them suddenly disappeared. Everything around them disappeared, leaving only the thick sea of fog floating around them. Lu Yichuan gasped for breath. Just as he was at a loss, the sea of fog in front of him suddenly rolled to both sides, revealing a 5-foot wide passage. The passage was only a few feet long, and at the end of the passage, a blood-colored figure was spinning around like a headless fly. It was the Blood Tribe member who had almost killed him. Lu Yichuan's heart tightened, and he almost instinctively wanted to escape, but he quickly realized that the Blood Tribe member's condition was not quite right. He had already discovered him, so logically speaking he should have discovered him as well. But in fact, this Blood Tribe member seemed to have been affected by something, and did not notice him at all. Someone was helping him in the dark. Lu Yichuan immediately reacted. This kind of method could only be used by the master of the formation. He clenched the spirit weapon in his hand and quietly approached the Blood Tribe member. When he was close, his spiritual power suddenly exploded, and he fiercely attacked the Blood Tribe member. Die. Only when Lu Yichuan suddenly attacked and his sharp aura approached did the Blood Tribe member suddenly react. However, it was already too late. As Lu Yichuan waved the spirit weapon in his hand, the blood shield on the Blood Tribe member's body shook violently. The powerful force hit the Blood Tribe member until he vomited blood, and his aura withered a lot. Originally, Lu Yichuan was not the Blood Tribe member's match, but now that he was seriously injured, the situation was immediately reversed. Lu Yichuan fought with the anger in his heart and used all the skills he had learned in his life to beat the Blood Tribe member until he could not resist at all. In just a moment, the Blood Tribe member was killed. In another part of the valley, within the mist, Pu Peng was locked in an endless battle with a Blood Clan member. The great monks of the Vajra Temple were indeed physically strong, and their vitality was also extremely vigorous. However, their bodies, which had never failed before, were of little use against a Blood Clan member. The Blood Tribe member's physique was not strong, but their chi and blood power was extremely strange and contained an extremely strong corrosive power. Pu Peng's powerful physical body, which had been tempered for decades, was now full of traces of corrosion, and even his golden shield was broken. Monk Pu Peng was very strong, but the Blood Tribe member he was fighting was not weak either. If there were no accidents, Pu Peng would definitely not be a match for him. In fact, if Pu Peng had not used the sound of Buddhist chants from time to time to shake the enemy's mind, he would have been dead long ago. Just as the two figures were fighting, there was a sudden muffled sound of thunder. A scorching white thunderbolt as thick as a baby's arm fell from the sky and coincidentally struck the Blood Tribe member's head. The tyrannical Blood Tribe member instantly trembled all over. Fine electric snakes swam on the surface of his body, and his aura weakened by a lot. This is a good chance. Monk Pu Peng's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and punched the Blood Tribe member who seemed to be unable to move. The power of this punch was enough to shatter gold and break stone. It landed heavily on the Blood Clan member's chest. The Blood Clan member's chest caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the back of his shirt exploded, revealing a circular hole. The back of his heart also swelled up for a moment. Ah! The Blood Tribe member spat out blood, but the blood mist that he spat out seemed to have a mind of its own as it enveloped Monk Pu Peng. Pu Peng had suffered such a loss before, so how could he not be prepared? The spiritual power around his body shook, and the blood mist was blown away. He punched 3 more times and directly killed the Blood Tribe member in front of him on the spot. In the mountain valley, people like Lu Yichuan and Monk Pu Peng were everywhere. The spirit array of the Medicine Valley could be said to be the most powerful creation Lu Yi had ever made since he started cultivating. Previously, when the Heavenly Gorge sect's pursuers were trapped in the spirit array, Lu Yi killed several Ninth Order elders by himself. Huang Liang found it hard to believe. But at that time, Lu Yi couldn't fully activate the power of the spirit array here because no one cooperated with him. If he wanted to truly exert the power of the spirit array here, he had to do it like this. He hid in the dark, controlled the power of the spirit array, and cooperated with the others who entered the spirit array to kill the enemies. However, this consumed a lot of his spiritual power because there were too many cultivators who entered the Mountain Valley spirit array this time. In addition to the Blood Tribe members who chased after them, there were more than tens of thousands of living beings fighting in the entire Medicine Valley. No matter how powerful his spiritual power was, he couldn't control all the positions. He could only try his best to cooperate with the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm to save some people who should have died. He also helped the cultivators who were at a disadvantage turn defeat into victory, turning the situation around bit by bit. The power of one's spiritual power was directly linked to the strength of one's soul. If Lu Ye's soul was strong, his spiritual power would naturally be strong as well. As time passed, the power of his spiritual power continued to be consumed. When Lu Yi felt tired, he decisively took out soul water and swallowed it to replenish himself. Yi and Hupa shuttled through the spirit array. Under his guidance, they accurately found the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators who were seriously injured and dying. Then they sent them to the little fairy doctor for treatment. In this way many lives were saved. However, there was only one little fairy doctor. Even if the medicine apprentices under her were extremely good medical cultivators, they could only play a limited role in such a situation. More and more cultivators died from their injuries. The entire medicine valley was filled with blood and corpses were strewn everywhere. This was no longer a simple battle between cultivators. This was a confrontation between two worlds. This was war. Facing the strong invasion of the Blood Tribe, the Soaring Dragon Realm couldn't retreat. There was no way out. Chapter 720. While controlling the formation to assist the Soaring Dragon cultivators in killing their enemies, Lu Yi was also observing the blood breeds. Like the Soaring Dragon cultivators, this was his first time coming into contact with such a peculiar race. Naturally, he had to take the opportunity to observe them. No matter what, this was an invader's territory, and there would be conflicts in the future. Know yourself and know your enemy and you will never be defeated. The blood breeds were generally taller and more slender than humans. Their most obvious feature was the blood-red glow on their exposed skin and a pair of pointed ears. Their blood was extremely corrosive. This was probably not because of the cultivation technique they cultivated, because every blood breed had such a characteristic. This was probably an innate ability of their race. And this ability was undoubtedly very troublesome for cultivators. Lu Yi saw with his own eyes that the protective spiritual power of cultivators was eroded and destroyed, and then killed. He also saw many cultivators' spirit tools being eroded and losing their spirituality, causing them to lose their battle power. The insect race did not have intelligence and they only brought destruction and slaughter. In comparison, the blood breeds' racial talents seemed to be specially born to restrain cultivators. Moreover, these blood breeds were proficient in some secret blood techniques, and when they were used they were extremely strange and impossible to guard against. This race was indeed powerful, but its weakness seemed to be very obvious. The Buddhist chanting of the monks of the Titanium Temple had a great impact on their minds, so the blood breeds often did not have the upper hand in their battles with those monks. Another point was that lightning techniques seemed to be very harmful to these blood breeds. Not to mention the miraculous effects of the many lightning summoning arrays that he had set up in the valley, there were many spell cultivators in the Soaring Dragon realm who had cultivated lightning spells. When these spells were released, the blood breeds who were attacked would often suffer great injuries. Next should be fire techniques. Although they did not have the same restraining effect as lightning techniques, they were also very harmful to the blood breeds. This was undoubtedly very valuable information, and could provide some help to the Soaring Dragon realm in the future against the blood breeds. However, what Lu Yi was most concerned about was the dozen or so blood breeds who had barged into the valley, and they seemed to be exceptionally strong. The power they displayed was indeed at the peak of the Cloud River tier, but their foundation did not seem to be something that a Cloud River tier cultivator could possess. So even with Lu Ye's secret help, they did not have a good ending against these blood breeds. Lu Yi could only activate the array to trap them, not giving them a chance to come into contact with the Soaring Dragon cultivators. There was something very wrong with these vampires. This sort of feeling caused him to be unable to help but recall the scene of his eldest senior sister, Wei Yang, slaughtering everyone at the top of the Golden Light. That day Wei Yang, with her true Lake Realm 9th Order cultivation, had forcefully charged into the Spirit Stream battlefield. Although she could only display the strength of a peak Spirit Stream Realm cultivator under the balance of the Heavenly Array, she still had a true Lake Realm foundation, so no one was her opponent. At this point Lu Yi suddenly understood. The Blood Tribe cultivators that caught his attention were indeed not at the Cloud River tier. It was extremely likely that they were at the true Lake tier. However, the Soaring Dragon realm was no longer capable of supporting the cultivators above the Cloud River. Therefore, after they entered this realm, they could only display the power of the peak of the Cloud River. In other words, the entire Soaring Dragon realm was suppressing their strength. If it weren't for that, the cultivator allied army would have been wiped out long ago. This was both good news and bad news. Even if they could only unleash power at the peak stage of the Cloud River tier, their foundation was still there, and ordinary Cloud River tier cultivators would definitely not be able to contend against them. If these Blood Tribe cultivators were already so powerful, then what about Xuexiao? From all the signs, the Blood Tribe invading the Soaring Dragon realm this time was led by Xuexiao. Naturally, he was the strongest. Just as Lu Yi was thinking, he suddenly caught a glimpse of the dozen or so powerful Blood Tribe cultivators acting strangely at the same time. He didn't know what kind of technique they used, but the dozen or so of them actually exploded at the same time, turning into flowing pools of blood. Immediately after, as if they had received some kind of guidance, the dozen or so pools of blood actually drew each other closer. Lu Yi immediately understood that the dozen or so powerful Blood Tribe cultivators had sensed that something was wrong and didn't hesitate to activate some powerful secret technique to escape. Naturally, he wouldn't sit and watch such a thing happen. He immediately activated the power of the Great Array, wanting to isolate the dozen or so pools of blood, and at the same time, activate the power of the various killing arrays. Boom boom boom. Explosions sounded, and the sea of fog rolled more and more violently. However, no matter what Lu Yi did, he couldn't stop the dozen or so pools of blood from gathering. They seemed to be able to sense each other's position within the layers of great arrays. What kind of mysterious technique was this? In a short while, the dozen or so pools of blood gathered in one place, turning into a sinister wriggling blood dragon. The blood dragon swept in all directions, shuttling back and forth within the great array of the valley. Even if Lu Yi activated the power of many killing arrays, it was still difficult to resist. Wherever the blood dragon passed, flowers and plants withered, and life dissipated. Some soaring dragon cultivators who couldn't dodge in time were wrapped in it and died without even making a sound. What made Lu Yi feel fortunate was that this secret technique seemed to be only available to the dozen or so strongest Blood Tribe cultivators. The other Blood Tribe cultivators didn't have this ability. However, the blood dragon was tyrannical. One by one, the trapped Blood Tribe cultivators were rescued and disappeared into the blood dragon. As the Blood Tribe cultivators merged into it, the blood dragon's size gradually expanded. Lu Ye's expression became serious. He didn't expect the Blood Tribe to have such a response. In his original plan, he could actually catch all the Blood Tribe cultivators who broke into the valley in one fell swoop. Now, looking at the winding blood dragon in the Medicine Valley, Lu Yi knew in his heart that he couldn't stop them with his own strength. However, no matter what this secret technique was, it must be extremely harmful to the Blood Tribe. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until now to use it. After making a choice in his heart, Lu Yi sighed helplessly. With a wave of his hand, the sea of fog in the valley churned endlessly. In front of the blood dragon, the sea of fog took the initiative to part, revealing a passage that led directly to the outside of the valley. Lu Yi could force the blood dragon to stay, but in this way, who knew how many more soaring dragon cultivators would die? The other party had already put on a stance of not giving up until one of them died. If Lu Yi wanted to save the lives of the soaring dragon cultivators, he could only let them go. The blood dragon obviously sensed Lu Ye's thoughts, so when the passage in the sea of fog appeared, it rushed out without hesitation. Along the way, it saved many Blood Tribe cultivators. It wasn't until it rushed out of the Medicine Valley that it let out an extremely angry and unwilling roar, shaking its head and wagging its tail as it quickly left. A moment later, a few hundred miles away, the sinister blood dragon suddenly collapsed. Balls of blood squirmed and transformed, revealing the figures of the Blood Tribe cultivators. However, not all the Blood Tribe cultivators who had merged with the blood dragon escaped. Some Blood Tribe cultivators had completely turned into blood, and there was no way for them to recover to their original state. Even those Blood Tribe cultivators who had recovered to their original state all looked like their vitality had been greatly damaged. Their originally blood-red skin had become much dimmer. Lu Ye's guess was right. Although this racial secret technique that belonged exclusively to the Blood Tribe was powerful, the backlash was also extremely fierce. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the Blood Tribe definitely wouldn't use this secret technique. About 1,000 people in this group of Blood Tribe cultivators had escaped from the Medicine Valley, but now only about 700 were still alive. The leader of the Blood Tribe, who looked somewhat old, turned back to look in the direction of the Medicine Valley. There was still some lingering fear in his eyes. I didn't think that this realm would actually have such a powerful formation. Another Blood Tribe cultivator who looked like a woman clutched her chest and said, "After all, there were divine ocean tier cultivators." Even after 800 years of absorption, and the volume of heaven and earth has faded, there are still records of higher-level mysteries. The old blood tribe cultivator shook his head and said, "Even so, there shouldn't be such a large formation. This is definitely not something that a Cloud River tier cultivator can set up. There's no point in saying more. Let's go back and report first. I hope Lord Blood Owl won't be too angry." At the mention of Blood Owl, the group of blood tribe cultivators all shuddered. Even to them, Blood Owl was an extremely frightening existence. In the Medicine Valley, the strongest group of blood tribe cultivators had escaped. The pressure on Lu Yi was greatly reduced, and he could concentrate more on controlling the power of the large formation. And with his help and cooperation, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon also became brazen and fearless. One after another, blood tribe cultivators were killed, and blood gathered into a river. Until half a day later, when the sea of fog that shrouded the Medicine Valley dissipated, all the cultivators of Soaring Dragon who were still alive looked around. In their field of vision, the whole Medicine Valley had been dyed red. Numerous corpses of humans and blood tribe cultivators were strewn across the ground, and the number of cultivators who were still standing was obviously much lower than when they had escaped into the Medicine Valley. However, what was comforting was that those who were still alive were all human cultivators. They had won. It was originally a situation of certain death, but after escaping into this valley, there was a shocking reversal. How could the cultivators not know that it was the function of the large formation here that allowed them to survive and kill their enemies? It was all the credit of the person who had set up the large formation. Many pairs of eyes looked towards the center of the valley, where Lu Ye's figure slowly descended with a pale face a few feet above the ground. Huang Liang hurriedly rushed over and asked with concern, "Little friend, are you all right?" After this battle, he was more certain than ever that Lu Yi was the savior who had carried all the fortune of heaven and earth. Therefore, after the battle ended, the first thing he did was to look for Lu Ye's figure, fearing that something bad had happened to him. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. "It's just that I've consumed a lot of energy. Little friend, rest first. This old man will take care of the rest." Lu Yi nodded and said, "I've captured a group of blood tribe cultivators and imprisoned them in a formation. Sect Master Huang, please take good care of them and don't let them escape." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed, revealing a large concealment formation. There were 7 or 8 blood tribe cultivators trapped inside, but these blood tribe cultivators had obviously suffered heavy injuries and were all dispirited and listless. With the formation enveloping them, they couldn't escape at all. If he wanted to gather information about the blood tribe, he naturally had to start with the blood tribe themselves. In the later stages of this battle, Lu Yi was already able to free himself, so he captured some blood tribe cultivators alive. As for what information he could obtain from these blood tribe cultivators, that would depend on his methods. At the very least, he had to understand what was going on with Tianhe and the Blood Tribe's foundation. Only then could he target them. 7017K. Chapter 721. The Medicine Valley had never been as lively as it was today. Cultivators shuttled back and forth in a hurry. After the battlefield needed to be cleaned up. It would have been fine if it had been some desolate wilderness, but this was the Medicinal Valley after all. Furthermore, there was a world-shaking great formation set up here. No one knew if the blood breeds would invade a second time. Thus, before the blood breeds made a comeback, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon were all contributing their strength. One by one, the corpses were carried out and buried. Those with light injuries took the initiative to take care of those with serious injuries. The fairy doctor and her medical apprentices were already so busy that they could stomp their feet on the back of their heads. Fortunately, when the Cultivator Alliance went to attack the Heaven Canyon sect this time, there were many medical cultivators accompanying them. This greatly reduced the pressure on her. Some cultivators sat on the ground in a daze, resting. Their expressions were empty. This day's experience was like a dream to many ordinary cultivators. Originally, it was just an internal problem of the Cultivator Alliance attacking the Heaven Canyon sect. However, somehow, it developed into an external war against the blood breeds. Outsiders invading the realm. No one would dare to believe such a thing if they didn't experience it for themselves. And the way in which the enemies invaded was actually the huge Heaven Canyon that had appeared in the Dragon Soaring Realm 800 years ago. If it weren't for the shocking formation in the Medicine Valley today, the entire Cultivator Alliance would have been slaughtered. And once this batch of elites was slaughtered, the Dragon Soaring Realm would no longer have any power to resist the blood breeds. They would be at their mercy. Although the Dragon Soaring Realm had suffered heavy losses, they still retained a group of main forces and had the capital to fight against the blood breeds. The news quickly spread through the entire realm through the Medicine Valley. Everyone who received the news couldn't believe it. However, as more and more people received the same news, and the three overlord sects jointly announced it to the world, this unbelievable thing became reality. In just half a day, the news of the blood breeds invading the dragon soaring realm spread to the most remote corners. People were terrified. Regardless of whether they were cultivators or mortals, they were all at a loss. There were also many rumors mixed with some talk of the end of the world. Those who committed crimes became more and more indulgent. For a time, the soaring dragon domain was in a precarious situation. External troubles had not been eliminated, internal troubles were frequent. The entire domain was in a state of turmoil. Amidst the turbulent times, the three overlord sects stood out once again. On one hand, they joined forces with the various sects of all sizes, using thunderous methods to eliminate all kinds of internal problems. On the other hand, they called upon the Dragon Ascension Realm's cultivation world to mobilize their troops north to fight against the blood breeds together. When the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact. Every cultivator who has been able to cultivate successfully knows this principle. Therefore, when the three overlord sects called for reinforcements, cultivators from all over the world responded. In less than 2 days, a large number of cultivators set off from all over the Soaring Dragon sect and rushed towards the north. Many sects were emptied overnight. Regardless of their age, they all headed north. In such a precarious situation, the cultivation world of Long Ting displayed unimaginable mobility and unity. It had to be said that this was a blessing. In the Medicine Valley, Lu Yi was accompanied by a group of array formation cultivators. Regardless of whether they were older than him, they were all respectful to him. In the cultivation world, strength was respected. In the group of array cultivators, whoever had the highest attainments in array Dao would naturally be respected. These array formation cultivators who followed Lu Yi had personally experienced the powerful might of the Medicine Valley's array. They knew in their hearts that it was impossible for them to set up such an array in their lifetime. Now that they were facing the master who set up this array, how could they not be respectful? At this moment, Lu Yi was not teaching them about array Dao. Instead, he was instructing them on how to control the Medicine Valley's array. After the previous battle, Lu Yi had noticed a problem. When he was setting up the Medicine Valley's array, he did not think too much. He was simply applying what he had learned. This caused the Medicine Valley's array to be exceptionally large and complicated. Therefore, the problem was obvious. With his strength alone, he could not perfectly control the array. Otherwise, so many Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators would not have died in the battle in the Medicine Valley. If he could perfectly control the array's power, not a single Soaring Dragon Realm cultivator would have died. On the contrary, none of the blood breeds who broke in would have been able to escape. To solve this problem, one way was to raise his strength far beyond his current level. At the very least, he had to reach the True Lake Realm. Another way was to borrow the help of others. For example, the native array cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Let each of them be in charge of an area, and then he would be the central controller. In this way, although he still could not fully exert the array's power due to the need for coordination, it should not be a problem to exert 70 to 80% of the array's power. The Soaring Dragon Realm had no idea about the situation with the blood breeds. Although they had repelled them once, no one knew if they would come back again. Therefore, the Medicine Valley had to be prepared for another battle at all times. Also, there were already more cultivators rushing over from all over the Soaring Dragon Realm. When the time came, the Medicine Valley would definitely become the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators' camp. It would also be the front line for the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators to fight against the blood breeds. Naturally, the more secure it was, the better. One by one, the array cultivators followed Lu Yi's footsteps. As they continued to understand the Medicine Valley's array, their reverence for Lu Yi deepened. Everyone's hearts were surging with shock. They could not imagine how a young man who was not even 20 years old and whose cultivation was only at the 6th order Cloud River realm could have such profound attainments in array Dao. He was more than a few streets ahead of these old array masters who had been famous for a long time. It was not until the last area was properly set up and the array cultivators were left behind that Lu Yi walked back leisurely. Sixth brother. In front of the straw hut, Yi Liuli greeted him. The little girl's face was a little pale, and her whole body was wrapped in a blood qi visible to the naked eye. The feeling this blood qi gave off was very similar to the aura of the blood breeds. Why did you run out? Didn't the little fairy doctor want you to rest more? Lu Yi raised his hand and patted her head, glancing at Yi who was standing beside Yi Liuli. Yi shook her head, looking like she had to come out no matter what. Yi Liuli enjoyed her sixth brother's doting behavior, and a smile bloomed on her face. It's so boring staying in the house all the time. She held Lu Ye's arm just like when she was young, not caring that she had grown up. Her eyes curved into crescents. And sixth brother has become a great hero. During the battle in the Medicine Valley, she was still in a coma. After waking up, she learned about the battle from Yi. She never thought that her sixth brother would become the key figure in saving the Soaring Dragon army. She couldn't believe it at first, but after walking out of the straw hut and seeing the cultivators coming and going, she believed it. For a moment she felt proud. If father, mother, and brothers knew about this in the underworld, they would definitely be very happy. Yi Liuli smiled even more happily. After the incident at the domineering Saber Mountain Villa, the little girl rarely smiled. Only now did she feel happy from the bottom of her heart. There's no great hero, it's just a coincidence. When he was setting up the array in the Medicine Valley, he didn't expect it to have such an effect. The reason he came to the Medicine Valley was to bring Yi Liuli to seek medical treatment. Everything that happened after that was a coincidence, but also a guide from the unseen world. I don't care, sixth brother is a great hero. Yi Liuli turned to look at Yi. Sister-in-law, don't you think so? Yi didn't correct her anymore. She pursed her lips and smiled. Yes, your sixth brother is the greatest hero. Alright, you should go in. If Senior Fairy Doctor knows about this, she'll scold you again. Yi Liuli reluctantly let go of Lu Ye's arm and followed Yi back into the straw hut. After the two girls left, a few figures who had been waiting by the side flashed over. They were Huang Liang, Yuan Changsuan, and Master Guang Jing. Yuan Changsuan and Guang Jing had already been introduced to Lu Yi by Huang Liang. Young friend. Huang Liang bowed. Thank you for your hard work. He knew what it meant to have an array master share the array he had set up without any reservations. It was equivalent to opening up one's attainments in Array Dao to other array masters to study and learn without holding anything back. Although the sectarian bias in the dragon soaring realm wasn't very serious, it was rare to see someone so broad-minded, especially when Lu Yi was a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. With those formation masters in charge of each area, the defense of the Medicine Valley would only be stronger. Even if the blood breeds came back, this place would have the capital to resist. It's Soaring Dragon's fortune to have you, young friend. Guang Jing placed a palm in front of his chest and bowed slightly. Yuan Changsuan also said, Cultivator, you should be able to rest in peace knowing that the domineering Saber Mountain Villa has someone like you. If Soaring Dragon can survive this disaster, Howren Academy is willing to help you rebuild the domineering Saber Mountain Villa. Howren Academy will do whatever you ask. The Medicine Valley's array alone wasn't enough for Yuan Changsuan to value Lu Yi so much. However, Huang Liang had been instilling in him and Master Guang Jing the idea that Lu Yi was the savior of the world. The two couldn't help but believe it. Huang Liang and Master Guang Jing also expressed their willingness to help Lu Yi rebuild the domineering Saber Mountain Villa. Lu Yi shook his head and said, The domineering Saber Mountain Villa has been destroyed. There won't be another one in the future. My sister and I have no intention of rebuilding the mountain villa. I appreciate your kindness. After a pause, Lu Yi suddenly said, Oh right, Academy Master Yuan is a sword cultivator, right? Yuan Changsuan nodded. Yes. When Academy Master killed the enemy in the array, the sword technique you used was very impressive. It was an eye-opener. Yuan Changsuan chuckled. That was Howren Academy's book sword technique. If you're interested, I'll have someone send you a copy later for you to take a look. How could he not understand the meaning behind Lu Ye's words? Although he found it strange that Lu Yi, who used a saber, would be interested in sword Dao, Lu Yi could let many formation cultivators comprehend the mysteries of the array. He was broad-minded. How could he, the Academy Master of Howren Academy, be inferior to a young man? In the face of such a great disaster, some of the previous rules of not imparting secret manuals to outsiders didn't need to be followed. If they couldn't survive this great disaster, Howren Academy wouldn't exist anymore. What was the use of secret manuals? In that case, thank you very much, Academy Master. Yuan Changsuan was surprisingly easy to talk to, which saved him a lot of effort. He naturally didn't want the book sword technique for himself to cultivate. He used a saber, so the book sword technique was useless to him. However, fourth senior brother was a sword cultivator, so this thing might be useful to him. 7017K. Chapter 722. Seniors, you're looking for me because of the captured blood breeds, right? Lu Yi asked. Huang Liang nodded with a serious expression. The blood breeds at Sky Gully haven't made any moves in the past 2 days, but the more it's like this, the more uneasy I feel. Although this was the first time they came into contact with the blood breeds, they were not a good race just from the fact that they would invade other people's realms. After suffering such a huge loss at the Medicine Valley, Huang Liang and the others had been worried that the blood breeds would make a comeback. But in fact 2 days had passed and there was no movement from the blood breeds. There must be a reason for this abnormality, so Huang Liang and the others had been monitoring Sky Gully for the past few days. But in the face of such an unfamiliar enemy, there was not much information that could be obtained through simple surveillance. The best way was naturally to start from the blood breeds themselves. The few blood breeds that Lu Yi had captured earlier would undoubtedly play a crucial role. As long as they could pry open their mouths, they would be able to obtain a lot of information about the blood breeds. Since they were captured by Lu Yi, they naturally had to come and greet Lu Yi. Seniors, please do as you wish. My original intention of capturing them was for this moment. Thank you very much, young friend. Huang Liang was excited. But seniors, please allow me to listen in. Lu Yi was also very interested in the blood breeds. It was the first time they had come into contact with this race, so no one knew more than the other. Of course. Huang Liang made the decision. A moment later, Lu Yi and the other 3 arrived at the trap formation that imprisoned the captured blood breeds. Although 2 days had passed, these blood breeds were still extremely weak, and there were dragon-soaring cultivators guarding nearby. They had no hope of escaping at all. Seeing Lu Yi and the others, the captured blood breeds immediately became vigilant. For the past 2 days, they had only been imprisoned here, and no one had come to pay attention to them. Now that people suddenly came, it was obvious that they were going to make a move. As prisoners, the Blood Clan members had already anticipated the worst possible outcome. Standing outside the trap formation, Huang Liang glanced at these blood breeds and said, "I'm Huang Liang, the sect master of the Dragon-Soaring Realm's Imperial Heavenly Sect. I'd like to inquire about some things. Who is willing to speak?" Some blood breeds spat at Huang Liang from across the formation and some sneered. There were even some grumpy ones shouted, "You want to inquire about the blood breeds? Wishful thinking. Kill us if you can." Although these vampires were all extremely weak, they appeared to be abnormally fierce and unyielding. Huang Liang was not surprised by this situation. Without saying a word, he signaled to the side with his eyes. Immediately, the soaring dragon cultivators guarding this place rushed into the trapping array and directly pulled out the Blood Clan who had shouted the most fiercely just now. After exiting the trapping formation, the seemingly weak Blood Clan member suddenly launched an attack, wanting to break free from his bindings. However, the soaring dragon cultivator who captured him was not weak either. He had long since made preparations, so how could he possibly let him succeed? With a few punches and kicks, the Blood Clan member was beaten to the ground. Within the trapping formation, the other vampires' eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They shouted incessantly, but no one paid them any attention. Huang Liang put his hands behind his back and looked down at the Blood Clan member in front of him. "How should I address you?" Although he did not know how to interrogate, he was still experienced enough to know that this was not the time to rush things. Therefore, he did not ask for information about the Blood Kindred and the Blood World. Instead, he tried to think of a way to make the Blood Kindred talk. As long as he could make the other party talk, there would be hope for the rest. "Call me Grandpa." The Blood Clan member raised his head. His eyes were filled with blood-red light as he glared fiercely at Huang Liang. Although his breath was weak, his aura was extremely fierce. Huang Liang nodded slightly. He did not waste any more words with him. He only lifted a finger and pointed it at his forehead. On the fingertip there was a faint flash of lightning. A trace of fear and horror flashed across the fierce Blood Clan member's eyes. The thunder technique had a strong restraining effect on the Blood Clan. This was already known to the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. No matter what, the battle in the Medicine Valley previously gave the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm some basic understanding of the Blood Clan. Seeing that Huang Liang's finger was approaching, the Blood Clan member still wanted to resist. However, with such a weak body, how could he resist? The fingertip pointed at the Blood Clan member's forehead. In an instant, lightning surged and enveloped the Blood Clan member. A crackling sound was heard as the lightning snake wandered around the Blood Clan member's body. The Blood Clan member immediately seemed to be suffering from extreme torture and pain. He screamed at the top of his lungs. "Excellent, excellent." Monk Guangjing lowered his eyes. He played with a string of Buddhist prayer beads in his hand and chanted some scripture. The lightning suddenly disappeared. The tortured Blood Clan member seemed to have broken all his bones. He fell to the ground softly. How should I address you? Huang Liang asked lightly. I am your grandpa. The Blood Clan member gritted his teeth as he enunciated each word clearly. Huang Liang pointed his finger at him again and lightning surged once more. After a while he stopped and asked the same question. After more than 10 times, the already weak Blood Clan member no longer had any signs of life. He had been tortured to death. However, even in death he did not obey Huang Liang's will. The toughness of his bones was beyond imagination. The cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm who were guarding the place felt chills down their spines. They secretly thought that if they were in his shoes, they might not have the courage of the Blood Clan member. They might even confess under such torture. This had nothing to do with morality or fear of death. When the torture exceeded one's limits, one's willpower would collapse. Huang Liang did not care that a Blood Clan member was tortured to death. From the beginning to the end, his expression was as calm as water. He gave the Blood Clan a feeling that this person kills people like scything flax and has a vicious nature. However, in reality Huang Liang had never done such a thing in his life. In the past, no matter how evil the people he met were, he would just kill them. He would not torture them at all. However, the Blood Clan was related to the future of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Therefore, even if he did not like it, even if he had never done it before, he had to adapt. He could not show any flaws on his face. This was the only way to make the Blood Clan fear him. When his image in the Blood Clan's mind evolved into a person who was even more vicious than them, the psychological defense of the Blood Clan would collapse. The process of torturing the Blood Clan was also a psychological game. Huang Liang, who was old, understood this principle. Another Blood Clan member was brought out. Although his expression was still vicious, there was a trace of fear in his eyes when he looked at Huang Liang. Their comrade was tortured to death by the thunder technique. No matter how strong the Blood Clan's bones were, it was impossible for them to remain indifferent. Following the same pattern, Huang Liang asked a question and gave the Blood Clan a thunder technique. However, no matter how the Blood Clan members were tortured, they did not relent. Some of them scolded Huang Liang loudly. Some of them took the initiative to attack Huang Liang in order to die quickly. There were also Blood Clan members who clenched their teeth from the beginning to the end. They did not make a sound until their teeth were crushed. After an hour, there were 4 more corpses of the Blood Clan. However, they did not obtain any information about the Blood Clan. They did not even find out the names of these Blood Clan members. Everyone's expression became serious. If a Blood Clan member was so stubborn, it might be due to their nature. However, if every Blood Clan member was like this, then it was a characteristic of their race. Not only were these extraterrestrial visitors extremely aggressive and cunning, they also had an extremely tenacious nature. Facing such an enemy was undoubtedly a nightmare. The 4th Blood Clan member died. Huang Liang looked at the remaining Blood Clan members, and his expression became hesitant. It was not that he had any moral burden. As a cultivator of the Dragon Soaring Realm and the sect master of the Imperial Heavenly Sect, he would not have any sympathy for these invaders. That was because being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to one's own people. If he could find out information about the Blood Clan, he might be able to reduce the casualties of the Dragon Soaring Realm. However, he could see that with the current development of the situation, even if he tortured all the Blood Clan members here to death, he might not be able to find out any useful information. It was not easy to capture a Blood Clan member alive. If he missed this opportunity, it might be difficult to find another way to obtain information. The few Blood Clan members undoubtedly saw his hesitation and started to provoke him. Sigh. Huang Liang sighed. Once he hesitated, his momentum would weaken. His moment of hesitation had undoubtedly made all his previous efforts useless. He turned to look at Yuan Changxuan. Is there anyone in the Howren Academy who is proficient in torture and interrogation? He did not ask Master Guangjing. The great monks of the Titanium Temple had always been merciful. How could they have such methods? Yuan Changxuan said leisurely, the academy is full of scholars. Why would a scholar interrogate someone by torture? That would not be a disgrace. In the end, the 3 great overlord sects were all brilliant sections. None of them were proficient in such underhanded methods. When they needed to use it, they would realize that no one could use it. I heard the screams from afar. I thought you were doing something. A gentle voice suddenly came from behind. Everyone looked over and found that it was the little fairy doctor. She stood beside Lu Yi and said, "Did you get anything out of them?" Huang Liang smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I did not get anything out of them." The little fairy doctor's expression was gentle. "How about letting me try?" Huang Liang was surprised. "Of course you can try, but these blood clan members are very stubborn. The little fairy doctor smiled kindly. There's no harm in trying. If they are stubborn, it doesn't mean that you can't pry them open. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and instinctively distanced himself from the little fairy doctor. The little fairy doctor sensed something and looked at him. What's wrong? Nothing. I just thought of an old friend. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched slightly. They were both medical cultivators, had the same face and showed the same kind smile. Lu Yi couldn't help but have some unpleasant memories. Little friend's old friend must be a very interesting person. That's why little friend can't forget him. The fairy doctor smiled sweetly. She looked at the guards. I'll have to trouble you to bring them out. The guards looked at Huang Liang with inquiring eyes. Huang Liang pondered for a moment and nodded slightly. 7017K. Chapter 723. The remaining blood breeds were all brought out. Under the fairy doctor's instructions, the cultivators guarding them were in charge of 1 blood breeds each, firmly controlling them and preventing them from moving. Looking at the beautiful and voluptuous woman in front of them, the blood breeds all revealed expressions of disdain. Even Huang Liang's cruel methods had not been able to subdue them. What could such a woman with a temperament as gentle as water do? The fairy doctor slowly walked in front of one of the blood breeds and softly said, "These 2 days I took the time to study some of the corpses of the blood breeds. I found that the blood breed's body structure is not much different from our soaring dragon realm's cultivators. They also have flesh and blood. When they are injured, they will bleed. When they are heavily injured, they will die. Although they are outsiders, it seems that they are from a different world from the soaring dragon realm." As she spoke, she suddenly raised her hand and pointed at the body of the blood breeds in front of her. A cold light flashed past. Lu Yi and the others who were standing nearby could clearly see that the flash of cold light was actually a needle smaller than a strand of hair. The fairy doctor's fingers trembled and continuously flicked across various parts of the blood breed's body. One after another, thin needles were flicked into the blood breeds' bodies. The blood breed's expression did not change. He frowned and asked, "What did you do?" He could feel that there were some foreign objects in his body, but he did not feel any discomfort. Therefore, he did not understand what the fairy doctor was doing. "Don't be anxious." The fairy doctor smiled at him and walked in front of the second blood breeds. Her jade-like hands trembled again. Very quickly, many thin needles appeared in the second blood breed's body. Using this method one after another, the living blood breeds were all inexplicably implanted by her. Only then did the fairy doctor retreat. Her eyes were curved and she smiled innocently. She said to the few blood breeds, "You guys, whoever speaks first will die a quick death." The few blood breeds sneered. The first blood breeds even sneered, "Wishful thinking. Don't be so absolute." That gentle tone did not seem to be threatening the enemy. Instead, it seemed like she was acting coquettishly. Just as she finished speaking, the first blood breeds that were implanted by her suddenly changed expression. His entire body seemed to be enduring unimaginable torture and pain as he suddenly screamed. That cry was extremely mournful, startling the soaring dragon cultivators guarding him. Immediately after, the blood clan member held his head and knelt on the ground. His eyes were instantly filled with blood vessels as he screamed incessantly. Another blood-curdling scream was heard. It was the reaction of the second member of the blood clan who had been implanted. Then came the third, the fourth. Even though Huang Liang and the others had seen their fair share of storms, they couldn't help but feel their scalps go numb. Just now, when he used the thunder technique to torture these blood clan members, they didn't seem to have such a big reaction. This little fairy doctor, who was known for saving lives and curing illnesses, what method did she use to silently make the blood clan members suffer such pain? For a moment, the way the elders looked at her changed. Lu Yi, on the other hand, was already mentally prepared for this. She thought to herself that it was indeed the case. Any woman who was beautiful, big and round, and was usually as gentle as water, had another side of humanity. Terrifying. Terrifying. The faction of medical cultivators was indeed full of hidden talents. They knew how to save people, so naturally they knew how to harm people better than others. Lu Yi secretly warned herself that in the future, if she met any hostile medical cultivators in the 9 regions, she absolutely couldn't let her guard down. Only God knew if they had any unknown methods. The blood-curdling screams were getting louder and louder. Many cultivators who came and went looked over, but no one knew what was going on. However, after seeing the figures of Huang Liang and the others, they faintly sensed something and didn't go forward to disturb them. In front of the trapping array, the little fairy doctor's voice sounded again, "Remember what I said just now. I won't repeat it a second time. When her voice fell, 2 Blood Clan members scrambled to speak. I'll speak, I'll speak. Since the little fairy doctor made her move, it had only been half a cup of tea's time. The Blood Clan members who made Huang Liang helpless had their psychological defenses broken under the endless torture and pain. Huang Liang and the others were all shocked. At the same time, their hearts were filled with joy. Fortunately, this was the little fairy doctor, a soaring dragon cultivator. If the Blood Clan had such methods, it would be too terrifying. Then you speak. The little fairy doctor pointed at the Blood Clan member who spoke first. Tell me everything you know about the Blood Clan, the Blood World, and don't hide anything. As she spoke, she suddenly raised her hand and pressed it on the Blood Clan member's chest. When she retracted her hand, there were more than 10 thin needles in her palm. It wasn't that she was compassionate, but under such torture, the Blood Clan member couldn't speak a complete sentence. The boundless pain quickly dissipated, but the blood-curdling screams of his companions were still incessant. Thinking back to what happened just now, the Blood Clan member couldn't help but shudder. He didn't dare to hesitate anymore and said in a hoarse voice, "The Blood World is a flowing domain that lives by plundering." Amidst the endless screams of the other Blood Clan members, this Blood Clan member tirelessly told everything he knew. He really didn't dare to hide anything. His companions were all listening. If he hid anything, his companions would definitely interrupt. At that time, he would have to endure that kind of torture again. Time passed. As they continued to understand the Blood World and the Blood Clan, the expressions of Huang Liang and the others were as solemn as water. This was because the information revealed by the Blood Clan was indeed somewhat inconceivable. In this vast void, the soaring dragon realm wasn't the only realm. Everyone was mentally prepared for this. Before the Blood Clan, the soaring dragon realm had an extraterrestrial object like the Dragon Emperor. Since there were extraterrestrial objects, it meant that there were other realms. The Blood World was one of the realms in this vast void. However, unlike most realms that were fixed in a certain position in the void, the Blood World was a flowing domain. The characteristic of the entire Blood World was plundering. In the process of flowing, if it encountered other realms, the Blood World would attach itself to it, plundering and absorbing the resources of the realms it encountered to strengthen itself. Every realm had its own resources. The strength of a realm's resources was directly related to the strength of the living beings that lived in the realm. This kind of resources could be said to be the foundation of a realm. It was the origin of the realm. For example, the realm of beasts that Lu Yi had entered previously wasn't very strong. This was because the cultivators that lived there were at most Cloud River tier cultivators. However, the realm of beasts wasn't the realm with the weakest resources. Perhaps in the vast void there were even weaker realms. In those realms, there might be no civilization born or there might be no cultivators. They were just a bunch of ordinary people. The soaring dragon realm's resources were undoubtedly stronger than the realm of beasts. It could even compete with the 9 prefectures because there had been divine ocean tier cultivators here. If it had always been like this, the soaring dragon realm wouldn't have changed much. However, since 800 years ago when the Blood World drifted near the soaring dragon realm, a drastic change occurred. A ravine that would never disappear appeared in the extreme north. The ravine was formed because of the Blood World's attachment. It was the power of the Blood World that tore a hole in the soaring dragon realm. It was like a leech attached to a human body. In 800 years, the leech that was the Blood World kept plundering the resources of the soaring dragon realm, causing the foundation of the soaring dragon realm to constantly fade. As a result, the upper limit of the cultivators of the soaring dragon realm kept decreasing. From divine ocean tier to true lake tier, from true lake tier to cloud river tier. In a few hundred years they might only be at spirit stream tier. The absorption and plundering of the world was never a simple matter. It could easily take hundreds or even thousands of years. Even though the resources of the soaring dragon realm would be completely depleted in another few hundred or thousand years, the blood breed still invaded. Because their invasion could speed up the plundering process. This was also the standard process that the Blood World and the Blood Breed used to plunder other realms. First, the Blood World would absorb and absorb, weakening the living beings in the plundered realms. Then they would invade forcefully and speed up the plundering process. When they chose to invade, the plundered realms would have no power to resist. In fact, if Lu Yi hadn't set up a great formation in the Medicine Valley this time and saved the soaring dragon realm's cultivators, everyone would have died in the previous battle. Once those cultivators died in battle, how could the soaring dragon realm resist the Blood Breed? However, it wasn't easy for the Blood Breed to invade other realms. Heaven and earth had spirits, especially in a realm like the soaring dragon realm that could nurture groups of cultivators. The will of heaven and earth was everywhere. Perhaps this will didn't have spiritual intelligence, but when heaven and earth were in danger, there would definitely be some reaction. This was also the reason why heroes were born in troubled times. These heroes all carried great fortune on their backs. They were the manifestation of heaven and earth's will in dealing with great disasters. Disasters in heaven and earth could trigger a reaction from heaven and earth. If there were external enemies invading, it would be even more intense. Therefore, if the blood breed wanted to invade other realms, they had to have an insider. Without an insider, they couldn't force their way in. In the Soaring Dragon realm, the Heavenly Gorge sect played such a role. The sect leader of the Heavenly Gorge sect, Sky Sage, had been comprehending the secrets of the gorge for decades. Therefore, he had some unknown connections with the blood breed. The Blood River Great Formation was passed down by the blood breed to guide the blood breed to this realm. Even so, after the blood breed arrived in the Soaring Dragon realm, they were still affected by heaven and earth. Even true Lake Realm blood breeds could only unleash peak Cloud River realm strength in the Soaring Dragon realm. This was the same rule as the Spirit Stream battlefield in the 9 states. The suppression of heaven and earth wasn't something that an individual could resist. Only a similar heaven and earth could resist. Now that the blood breed had invaded, they hadn't made any moves or made a comeback in the past 2 days. It wasn't that they didn't want to avenge their dead clansmen, but that they had more important things to do. They were building a special altar to guide the complete descent of the Blood Realm. Once the Blood Realm completely descended, the Soaring Dragon Realm's foundation would be plundered clean in an extremely short period of time. When that time came, they would be able to get their revenge. 7017K. Chapter 724. The Blood Clan's target had always been the Soaring Dragon Realm, not the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. They had chased after the Soaring Dragon Realm in order to weaken the resistance of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Since they had failed and suffered heavy losses, the Blood Clan had simply ignored them. Moreover, traveling between 2 realms was not as easy as one would think. Even with the help of the Heavenly Gorge sect, who had set up the Blood River Formation, the first batch of Blood Clan members who could enter the Soaring Dragon Realm would not be many. Therefore, what the Blood Clan needed to do now was to quickly build an altar to guide the descent of the Blood Realm as well as more of their people. Once the Blood Clan completed their plan, the destruction of the Soaring Dragon Realm would be imminent. The Blood Clan member who was pointed out by the fairy doctor told her everything that he knew, amidst the miserable cries of the other Blood Clan members beside him. The situation was much more serious than they had imagined. Based on the limited information they had, Huang Liang and the others had thought that the descent of the Blood Clan was an enemy invasion. If that was the case, they only needed to think of a way to defeat the enemy. However, now it seemed that this was not just the invasion of the Blood Clan. The greater danger came from the descent of the Blood Realm. This was a disaster that targeted the entire realm. Moreover, things had happened too suddenly. The Soaring Dragon Realm was not prepared at all. Although the news had spread through various channels and basically all the cultivators knew about the Blood Clan, the real situation was only known to a few people present. This is a serious matter. We have to announce it to the world. Yuan Changsuan's expression was serious. The Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators had to know what kind of enemy they were facing and what kind of situation they were in. This way, the cultivators would know that they had no way out in the face of the Blood Clan. Any retreat would only lead to eternal damnation. In these 2 days, a large number of cultivators in the Soaring Dragon Realm had rushed to the north under the call of the 3 overlord sects to prepare to defend against the enemy. However, there were also some with ulterior motives who wanted to rely on the Blood Clan. In their opinion, if the Heavenly Gorge sect could rely on the Blood Clan, so could they. The Blood Clan had already displayed great power. Perhaps the Heavenly Saints' plan for the Soaring Dragon Realm was not as bad as they had imagined. However, if these people knew the Blood Clan's real plan, they might not think that way. Huang Liang and Master Guangjing nodded. They would not hide such important information. Not only could they not hide it, but they would also spread it as much as possible. Let's hurry up. Huang Liang's eyes were filled with worry. We have to be faster than the blood race. We can't let them finish building that so-called traction altar. Once it's completed, Soaring Dragon will die. Originally, the Soaring Dragon Realm had a natural front line against the blood breeds with the Medicine Valley's Great Array. However, from the looks of it now, the Medicine Valley's Great Array was no longer of much use. Soaring Dragon's side did not have the qualifications to passively defend. They had to take the initiative to attack. Even if they had to pay with their lives, they had to stop the blood breed's plan of building the traction altar. Just as the 3 of them were talking, there seemed to be another change in the distant void. Everyone sensed something and raised their heads to look in the direction of the ravine. They saw that in the vast ravine that stretched across the void, there was a dense blood-red light, as if a river of blood was pouring down. One of the vampires, who was howling miserably, suddenly let out a sharp laugh. "My vampires' reinforcements have arrived. Are all dead?" The fairy doctor turned her head and looked at him. She raised her hand and shot out a few flying needles. They pierced into the Blood Clan member's body, causing his already mournful screams to become even more tragic. When the other vampires saw this, they were all filled with fear. They only felt that this human woman was more terrifying than all the creatures they had ever seen. Everyone was not quite sure what the change in the ravine was, but after listening to the Blood Clan members' words, they immediately understood that something worse had happened. The first batch of vampires to descend upon Soaring Dragon was not many. They had suffered heavy casualties in the Medicine Valley battle. At that time, if the Soaring Dragon realm had used the power of a realm to attack, they might have been able to repel the vampires. However, now that the vampires had received reinforcements, it would be difficult to achieve this. Huang Liang and the others were very upset for a moment. However, on second thought, even if they had known this information before, it would have been useless. This was because it would take time for the Soaring Dragon realm to gather manpower. There was no time to launch such a large-scale war in a hurry. In fact, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon were still on their way to this day. It would take 1 or 2 days to reach Snow Province if they were fast, and it might take 3 to 5 days if they were slow. Huang Liang and the others hurriedly left. They wanted to quickly spread the information they had just found out so that the cultivators who came to support could speed up. Only Lu Yi, the little fairy doctor, and the cultivators guarding the vampires were left. The little fairy doctor looked at the vampires who had revealed the information and smiled slightly. "I mean what I say." The vampires heaved a long sigh of relief, and then a bright saber light flashed in front of his eyes. The saber light flashed again, and the vampires who were still screaming died one by one. Lu Yi sheathed his saber. The little fairy doctor looked at him in surprise. "Why did you kill them all? Didn't they say that whoever spoke first would have a quick death? Wouldn't this make it seem like she was going back on her word? Since we already have information, it's useless to keep it. It's so noisy," Lu Yi explained lightly. In fact, he was calming his mind and checking his battlefield imprint. In the battlefield imprint, the line that recorded the battle merits was marked 29,718 points. The number of battle merits worth nearly 2 golden spiritual sticks. When he entered the Soaring Dragon realm, Lu Yi was filled with anticipation. Because of his previous experience in the realm of beasts, he knew that it was very likely that he would be able to obtain things like battle merits in a secret realm with a realm as its background. He had obtained a huge amount of battle merits in the Tianyuan city's realm, but he had exchanged them all for soul water. It was a good deal. After all, there were always other ways to obtain battle merits, but soul water could only be obtained from Tianyuan City. It was because of his gains in Tianyuan City that he could go to the 100 Formation Pagoda without any scruples and obtain even more rewards. But there was still some regret. For him, the most urgent thing now was to use his battle merits to exchange for spiritual sticks and increase his cultivation. Only then could he have enough power to protect himself on the Cloudy River battlefield. He thought that the Soaring Dragon realm was an opportunity. However, the result disappointed Lu Yi greatly. He had killed a number of people, but not only did he not gain any merit points, he did not even gain any merit points. But surprises always came when one wasn't expecting them. When the Blood Clan invaded and attacked the Medicine Valley, he guarded the center of the formation and cooperated with the Soaring Dragon cultivators to kill the enemy. While he became famous in one battle, he also obtained a lot of battle merits. In the Battle of the Medicine Valley, none of the Blood Clan members died directly at Lu Ye's hands. They were all killed by the Soaring Dragon cultivators with Lu Ye's cooperation. But even so, his contribution in the Battle of the Medicine Valley could not be erased. Lu Yi guessed that this was the source of the large amount of battle merits. The way to obtain battle merits and merits were not the same. Merits could only be obtained by killing enemies. How many merits could be obtained depended on the type of enemy killed. But battle merits did not necessarily have to be obtained by killing enemies personally. In a battle, one could also obtain battle merits based on how much strength one contributed. Heaven's Secrets had its own criteria for judgment. In the Battle of the Medicine Valley, even if Lu Yi did not personally kill any Blood Clan members, he had contributed greatly to their victory. That was why he could obtain so many battle merits. He vaguely remembered that after the Tianyuan City realm, he was only left with 836 points. Now he had nearly 30,000 points. It was clear that he had obtained a lot in the Battle of the Medicine Valley. To Lu Yi, the blood clan was equivalent to battle merits. Now that he could easily obtain battle merits, how could he hesitate? Mosquito meat was still meat. Moreover, the 4 blood clan members had brought him nearly 200 battle merits, which was worth a white spirit stick. Just as he was investigating, a message suddenly came from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi hurriedly checked it, then grabbed the fairy doctor's arm and rushed toward the straw hut. Lioli's illness is acting up again. There were abnormal movements over at the ravine. The blood clan reinforcements had arrived and once again imprinted on Yi Lioli's body. They quickly arrived at the straw hut. The fairy doctor went up to treat Yi Lioli and spent a lot of effort to stabilize her condition. Walking out of the straw hut, she saw Lu Yi gazing at the ravine on the horizon with a focused expression. She asked, "What are you thinking about?" Lu Yi said leisurely, "Clothes can be mended if they're torn, but how do you mend the ravine?" Although it was a question, Lu Yi already had an answer in his heart. Looking at all the signs, the ravine was the only way to completely eliminate Yi Lioli's illness. The formation of the ravine was directly related to the absorption of the blood realm. Therefore, the only way to mend the ravine was to make the blood realm retreat and leave the soaring dragon realm voluntarily. In this way, without the blood realm's attachment and absorption, the ravine would naturally be able to slowly repair itself. But to achieve this, there was a prerequisite: to repel the invading blood clan. To make the blood clan not dare to invade the soaring dragon realm through the ravine. At this point, Lu Yi could already vaguely feel that there was only one final goal for his trip to the soaring dragon realm: mend the ravine. If he could complete this, he would definitely obtain more battle merits than the Battle of the Medicine Valley. He more or less understood why the entrance to this mystic realm was a broken teleportation array. That entrance was obviously a test. Only by repairing that broken teleportation array would he be qualified to enter this realm and carry out his plan to mend the ravine. He had a vague plan in his heart, but to carry out this plan he still needed a lot of help. What made him rejoice was that the soaring dragon realm's cultivation world was able to react quickly in the face of such a calamity. This was inseparable from the long-established 3 great overlord sects. And Huang Liang and the rest were extremely friendly to him these few days. This unknowingly reduced the resistance to his plan. The news of the blood clan's blood realm was still fermenting among the cultivators of the soaring dragon realm. An even richer and more terrifying news came from the 3 great overlord sects. 7017K. Chapter 725. The source of the ravine's appearance and the reason behind the cultivation world's decline were only known today. For a moment, the entire dragon soaring realm's cultivation world was agitated. In the past 800 years, many heroes had emerged in the dragon soaring realm's cultivation world. However, because of the changes in the world, their cultivation path was blocked. Previously they did not know the reason, but now that they knew it was all because of the blood realm's absorption, who would not be angry? The blood realm's ultimate goal was to devour the entire dragon soaring realm's foundation. If that was the case, dragon soaring realm would definitely perish. When the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. The cultivators were all dragon soaring realm's cultivators. If dragon soaring realm perished, they would naturally not be able to survive. If they wanted to live, they had to kill all the blood race. For a moment, the dragon soaring realm's cultivators showed an extremely strong hatred towards the blood race, this foreign enemy that had suddenly descended. They were determined to kill them all. Under the ravine, a large number of blood race members gathered, causing the place to be filled with a bloody aura. The blood in the Great Blood River Formation, which covered a radius of dozens of miles, had already dried up. However, there were still dark red stains left in the ravines. The spot where the altar originally stood had been replaced by a gigantic altar that occupied an area of an area. The altar was in the shape of a 6-pointed star. All kinds of mysterious and complex patterns appeared and disappeared on it, making the entire altar look like a living thing. The constantly flashing light was the altar's breathing. The blood race's efficiency was undoubtedly extremely high. Since they invaded the dragon soaring realm, it had only been a few days, but they had already built such a complicated altar. The materials needed to build the altar were all brought by the blood race from the blood realm. It was obviously not the first time they had done this, so they were extremely skilled. There were specialized blood race members in charge of pursuing the native enemies, and there were also blood race members in charge of defense. There were also blood race members in charge of building the altar. The moment the altar was built, a bloody light surged into the ravine. Then, as if the ravine was bleeding, the blood river overturned, and a large number of blood race members descended upon the dragon's soaring realm. Xing Yimou and Qing Henfeng, who was missing an arm, followed behind the heavenly saint. They looked at this scene from afar, and their emotions were extremely complicated. They were undoubtedly extremely lucky to have been able to preserve their lives in the previous conflict. However, in their current state they didn't know whether they should be happy or angry. The Blood Clan had planted an extremely peculiar secret technique on them. According to Xue Xiao, it was the Blood Slave Seal. The one who was planted with this seal would become the blood slave of the Blood Clan. Slave. To experts like them who already stood at the peak of a world, the word, slave, was undoubtedly a humiliating word. However, they did not dare to voice their anger. Not to mention the terrifying foundation that the Blood Kindred had displayed, just the seal that they had cast was enough to easily control their life and death. They could feel that with the Dharma seal, any member of the blood race, even if they were far weaker than them, could easily kill them. The Heavenly Saints and the surviving cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect felt the same way. Now they had completely become the slaves of the blood race. Heavenly Saint, is this the way out you found? Xing Yimou asked softly, feeling bitter inside. After paying such a huge price, what was the point of finding a way out? The Heavenly Saint did not speak, but both Xing Yimou and Qing Henfeng could feel the turmoil in his heart. When a member of the blood race passed by, the three of them hurriedly bowed, appearing extremely humble. They had already suffered a loss before, so they knew how to behave in front of these blood race members. Sect Masters, save me! A mournful cry was heard. Xing Yimou turned his head and saw a beautiful woman with fair skin being held in the hands of a blood race member. She was screaming in fear. That was the 31st elder of the sect, a rare female expert of the Heavenly Gorge sect. Normally she was an extremely strong-willed woman, but now she seemed so helpless. The Heavenly Saint was still bowing as if he did not hear anything. Xing Yimou and Qing Henfeng almost broke their teeth from clenching their teeth. Anger surged in their hearts, but they did not dare to act rashly. The blood race member smiled maliciously and bit the 31st elder's slender neck. Gulping sounds were heard, and the 31st elder's screams gradually weakened and disappeared completely. When the blood race member left in satisfaction, the originally beautiful 31st elder had become a withered corpse that was casually thrown on the ground. Many cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect had survived the previous battle, but they had not survived the blood race's rampage. In the past few days, countless cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect had died tragically at the hands of the blood race. To the blood race, these blood slaves were like livestock that they could take as they pleased. No blood race member cared about what they thought. What shocked them even more was that these blood race members actually sucked human blood. The Heavenly Gorge sect was filled with all kinds of evil people. Xing Yimou and Qing Henfeng were experienced and knowledgeable people, but there was a limit to how evil the cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect could be. Sucking human blood. This was something that they did not even dare to think about. From what they had observed, it seemed that every blood race member had such a hobby or ability. They could drink human blood to strengthen themselves. Xing Yimou and Qing Henfeng had felt the greedy eyes of the blood race members on them more than once in the past few days. Fortunately, they had been following the Heavenly Sage, who had been personally planted with the blood slave Dermic seal by the Blood Owl. Therefore, ordinary blood race members did not dare to treat them that way for the time being. But who could guarantee that they would always be safe? Xing Yimou suddenly faintly sensed something and raised his head to look into the distance. He saw the silhouettes of numerous large ships in the horizon, and the figures of numerous cultivators were moving about freely on the ships and on the sides of them. They're finally here. Qing Henfeng heaved a long sigh. The blood race's invasion could not be ignored by the dragon race's cultivation world. Previously, the dragon race had been caught off guard and suffered heavy casualties. Then, the blood race had chased them down and forced them to flee. No one knew what had happened after that, but the blood race was almost completely wiped out. Only a few hundred people had managed to escape. Now that a few days had passed, the dragon race's cultivation world should have gathered a lot of information. They would definitely take action in the face of such a calamity. There were countless spirit ships as far as the eye could see. They were much larger than the Heavenly Gorge sect that the dragon race's cultivation world had attacked a few days ago. No matter what, the last time was just an internal conflict. Today they were trying to get rid of an external threat. The dragon race was going all out. Destroy them as soon as possible. Qing Henfeng thought viciously. He could not help but feel a sense of relief. The blood race had naturally sensed such a huge commotion from the dragon race's cultivation world. However, they were not afraid. Instead, they were filled with fighting spirit. They came from the Blood Realm. How could they take a group of human cultivators who were only at the Cloud River tier seriously? The Blood Race had destroyed more than one or two realms like the Soaring Dragon Realm. In the long history of the Blood World, countless realms like the Soaring Dragon Realm had been sucked into empty shells by the Blood Race and turned into barren lands by the Blood Race. They had not taken action before, not because they were afraid of the Dragon Race's cultivators, but because they could not leave. Now that the Dragon Race's cultivators had taken the initiative to come to their doorstep, wasn't this exactly what they wanted? As a race that relied on invasion and plunder, the Blood Race's belligerence and ferocity were incomparable to the Dragon Race's cultivators. Without needing Shui Xiao to give the order, a large number of Blood Race members moved. Even though their fighting spirit was boiling, the Blood Race did not take the initiative to attack. Instead, they took a defensive stance and formed a dense and solid line of defense. Their most important task now was not to attack and kill the enemy, but to protect the attraction altar. The altar had been completed. The connection between the Blood Realm and the Dragon Race would become closer and closer. As time passed, more Blood Race would descend into this realm. If they could build more altars, this process would be greatly accelerated. The more altars there were, the less time it would take for the Blood Realm to devour the Dragon Race. Do what you want to do. Don't be an eyesore by my side. The Heavenly Saint, who had been silent for the past few days, suddenly spoke. Xing Yimo and Qing Henfeng were shocked. They immediately bowed. Thank you, Sect Master. What they had seen and heard in the past few days made them realize that they would become food for the Blood Race sooner or later. The Heavenly Saint had the protection of Shui Xiao. The Blood Race could look down on him, but no one dared to rashly treat him as food. However, the two of them did not have such good luck. Therefore, if they wanted to live, they had to find a way to escape. The Dragon Race's cultivators' large-scale attack was undoubtedly an opportunity. The Heavenly Saint's words showed that he had seen through their intentions. After thanking him, the two of them turned to leave. However, at this moment, the Heavenly Saint suddenly stretched out his hand. Spiritual energy surged in his body, and he hit the back of the two of them. The two of them flew high into the air like kites with broken strings. They both spat out blood. Xing Yimo spat out pieces of his internal organs. When he turned around in shock, he only saw the Heavenly Saint's cold face. He was instantly filled with grief and indignation. Heavenly Saint, you will die a horrible death. Qing Henfeng did not curse. Instead, he brazenly attacked with his sword. The sword light was piercingly cold as it enveloped a few Blood Race members nearby. This was the last sword of his life. Qing Henfeng used all his strength. The space seemed to have been cut open. The few Blood Race members who were caught off guard were directly turned into pieces of flesh. The cuts were neat and smooth. However, this was the end. In the next moment, Xing Yimo and Qing Henfeng's bodies suddenly froze. Their skin turned red as if their blood had started to boil. Some Blood Race members had activated the Blood Slave seal in their bodies. The nearby Blood Race members swarmed forward and surrounded them. Through the crowd, Qing Henfeng finally saw a flash of blood-red light in the Heavenly Saint's eyes. Only then did he understand that the Heavenly Saint's mind had long been corrupted by the Blood Race's secret technique. He was loyal and devoted to the Blood Race. He was different from them who had been implanted with the Blood Slave seal. They were loyal on the surface but not on the surface. At the same time, all the Blood Race members near the surviving Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators began to move. The blood-curdling screams did not stop. In just a few breaths, everything quieted down. The vampires dispersed and withered corpses could be seen everywhere. As if they had just experienced a blood sacrifice, the Blood Race members' fighting spirit soared. 7017K. Chapter 726. Snow Province was located in the north of Soaring Dragon territory. The land was bitter and the weather was cold. Not only were there few people, but the environment was also worse than other places in Soaring Dragon territory. The sky of Snow Province was shrouded in thick dark clouds all year round, and it was rare to see the sun. However, on this day, as the huge fleet of spirit ships continued to move forward, the dark clouds that had accumulated over the years began to dissipate. Wherever the fleet went, the sun shone. Almost all the cultivators of Soaring Dragon territory felt like they were being blessed by the heavens. On the leading ship stood several figures. It was Huang Liang, Yuan Chang, Xiyuan, Guang Jing, and the others. Looking at the scene in the distance, the three of them had solemn expressions. The previous battle had shown them the power and treachery of the Blood Race. This time, it could be said that the Soaring Dragon Territory's cultivation world had turned out in full force. If they couldn't win this battle, then there would be no future for Soaring Dragon Territory. It wasn't that they didn't want to know more about the blood race, but that they didn't have the time to do so. Based on the limited information they had, if the Soaring Dragon Territory wanted to expel the foreign enemy, they could only end the battle quickly. The longer they delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for Soaring Dragon Territory. Therefore, even though this battle was extremely hasty, Soaring Dragon Territory could only bite the bullet and fight. While the three of them were observing the situation in the Heavenly Gully, they were also constantly exchanging their opinions. The cultivators of the three overlords' sect masters passed down the orders of the three overlords. Lu Yi stood not far from the three of them. Half a day ago, the Soaring Dragon Territory cultivators in the Medicine Valley set off under the leadership of Huang Liang and the others. They joined the coalition forces from other places and advanced towards the Heavenly Gully. Naturally, Lu Yi followed. Not to mention that he had already seen through the ultimate goal of this trip to the Soaring Dragon Territory's sealed world, which made it impossible for him to stay in the Medicine Valley alone. Even if he could obtain war merits from killing the blood race, he couldn't stay idle. His current cultivation was only at the 6th Order Cloud River realm. If he wanted to break through to the 7th Order, relying on less than 30,000 war merits was not enough. He needed more. This was a battle that could determine the life and death of a world. If he handled it well, the war merits would not be too little. Perhaps after this, he would have enough capital to break through to the 7th Order or even the 8th Order. Huang Liang and the others had finished their discussion. When they looked forward again, they saw a sanguine glow soaring into the sky from the heavenly ravine. Even from dozens of kilometers away, they could sense the dense battle intent of the vampires. Apart from the cultivators who had escaped into the Medicine Valley, the other cultivators had never come into contact with the Blood Tribe. However, everyone had heard news about the Blood Tribe in the past few days and knew about the treacherous secret techniques of the Blood Tribe. Therefore, many of them looked very nervous. On the ships, the teachers were comforting their disciples and stimulating their fighting spirit. Their impassioned voices rose and fell one after another. "Little friend, the battle will be extremely chaotic. You must be careful." Huang Liang turned his head and warned Lu Yi. Having already determined that Lu Yi was the savior of the world, Huang Liang was naturally more concerned about Lu Yi's safety than anyone else. Originally, he did not want to bring Lu Yi to such a dangerous place, but on second thought, if Lu Yi really was the savior of the world, no matter where he was, he would inevitably be involved in this storm. Rather than letting him stay in the Medicine Valley, it would be better to have him under his nose. This way, if there was any danger, he could take care of him. Junior will remember. Lu Yi nodded. After a moment of silence, Huang Liang whispered again, "Don't use the Dragon Emperor so easily. If Lu Yi really was the savior of the world, then the Dragon Emperor must be the means to save the world." It was the Dragon Ascension Realm's response to the Great Calamity, but the Dragon Emperor was too dangerous to use. Huang Liang was clear about Zhuang Bufan's fate. Lu Yi was only a 6th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator now, so once he used the Dragon Emperor, he would die immediately. Lu Yi nodded. He could not help but recall the previous scenes in his mind. Before Zhuang Bufan died, he had given the Dragon Emperor to him, so he had not been idle these days and had been studying this divine artifact. Faintly, he had a feeling that the Dragon Emperor had some natural affinity with him. He did not know if Zhuang Bufan had this feeling when he had the Dragon Emperor, and he did not know where to ask now, but it was very likely that he had not. The little fairy doctor had said that Zhuang Bufan had not obtained the approval of the Dragon Emperor, so he could not control it. Forcefully using it would cause great harm to himself. But what if he obtained the approval of the Dragon Emperor? Would he be able to control it then? Lu Yi did not dare to try. If things were not as he thought, rashly trying would only worsen his situation. The reason why Zhuang Bufan was on the verge of death was because after obtaining the Dragon Emperor, he had stimulated its power to see what it really was. At that time he had not used it in battle. Over the past few days, whenever Lu Yi had free time, he would try to refine the Dragon Emperor. His progress was extremely smooth, and this divine artifact did not reject his spiritual energy at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be eager to accept him. Today, Lu Yi had completely refined the Dragon Emperor and could stimulate its power at any time. This was undoubtedly good news for him. No matter how bad the situation was, he still had a trump card he could use. The fleet continued to move forward, quickly crossing a few dozen kilometers. There was no pre-battle mobilization. Everything that needed to be said had already been said before they set off. Facing an invading enemy like the Blood Race, there was only one thing the Soaring Dragon cultivators needed to do. Kill. Kill all the Blood Race cultivators and Soaring Dragon's crisis would be resolved. As the distance between the fleet and the Soaring Dragon cultivators got closer and closer, many Soaring Dragon cultivators secretly pushed their spiritual energy ready to attack. 50,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 10,000 feet. The unique face of the Blood Race was already clearly imprinted in the eyes of the Soaring Dragon cultivators. Accompanied by a deafening buzzing sound, the ship that Lu Yi was on shook violently, and a light pillar as thick as a water bucket shot forward like a roaming thunderbolt. It was the formation on the spirit ship that had displayed its power. There were weapons like the flying dragon ships in the 9 prefectures that could be used to attack cities, and Soaring Dragon naturally had them as well. However, because the upper limit of Soaring Dragon cultivators was not high, this kind of spirit ship was much weaker than the flying dragon ships, and it was extremely difficult to build. In the whole Soaring Dragon realm, there were only 10 such warships in total, and they were all controlled by the 3 overlord sections. A few days ago, they had lost 1 in the battle, and now there were only 9 left. Now these 9 warships were all out, lined up in a row. At the same time the first buzzing sound rang out, the other 8 sounded almost at the same time. The light pillar that shot forward was not 1, but a total of 9. The distance of 10,000 feet was crossed in the blink of an eye. 9 extremely tyrannical attacks that Cloud River cultivators could not resist at all headed straight for the huge altar. Killing the Blood Tribe was admittedly important, but the attraction altar was even more important. As long as they could destroy the attraction altar, then they could delay the descent of the Blood Realm, and at the same time, leave the Blood Tribe alone. If they could do this, then Soaring Dragon would be in an invincible position in this battle. This was also the plan that Huang Liang and the others had discussed in advance. Pairs of eyes converged and everyone's hearts were in their throats. The 9 light pillars carried with them an unstoppable force, and broke open 9 vacuum zones in the void, leaving behind clear marks wherever they passed. Some of the Blood Tribe members who had set up a formation at the front were accidentally hit by the light pillars, and directly turned into a bloody mist and disappeared without even the time to react. With such a terrifying power, no matter what the altar was built with, once it was hit, it would definitely be destroyed into nothingness. However, just as the 9 light pillars were about to land on the altar, a thick layer of blood-colored light suddenly appeared out of thin air, enveloping the entire altar. Boom, 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 as the loud sound rang out, the light pillars rippled on the blood-colored light barrier like concentric circles, continuously spreading out. Seeing this scene from afar, Huang Liang and the others clenched their teeth. Although they had expected it, when they saw the Blood Tribe setting up a protective array around the attraction altar with their own eyes, they were still unwilling to accept it. Ridiculous. In the Blood Tribe's camp, Xue Xiao looked at this scene indifferently with a calm expression. The Blood Tribe had invaded countless realms, and they were already familiar with how to deal with the situation in front of them. Therefore, no matter what the Soaring Dragon realm side did, it was within the Blood Tribe's expectations. How could such an important existence like the attraction altar not have a protective array? Moreover, the array set up by the Blood Tribe was definitely not something the Soaring Dragon realm could break. In other words, the invincible force in this battle was not Soaring Dragon, but the Blood Tribe. Again? Huang Liang shouted. Boom, 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 another round of attacks and another 9 light pillars as thick as buckets blasted toward the altar like thunder dragons. However, other than creating ripples on the blood-colored light barrier, it did not have any effect at all. The power of this protective array had exceeded the limit of what the Soaring Dragon realm cultivators could deal with. Again? Huang Liang shouted again. He didn't believe that the defensive formation could last forever. Boom, 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 when the light pillars dissipated and the spiritual power calmed down, the scene imprinted in their eyes made them despair. Damn it! Huang Liang was so angry that his beard was trembling. Before he could give another order, Yuan Changsuan stopped him. There's no way to continue. After 3 consecutive attacks in a short period of time, the spirit ship's array formation was somewhat overwhelmed. If another attack were to come, regardless of whether the protective array formation could withstand it or not, the spirit ship definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Guang Jing sighed slightly. If he had known this would happen, he would have attacked the Blood Tribe's camp. At least there would be some damage to the Blood Tribe. However, this kind of attack took a long time to accumulate power, and it was not flexible enough. Therefore, it was usually used to attack a city. If it was used to deal with a single cultivator, the cultivator who sensed the danger would have run away long before the accumulation of power was completed. Therefore, even if it was used, the impact on the Blood Tribe would not be too great. Since the spirit ship was useless, they could only charge and kill. In this battle, it was unknown how many Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators would lose their lives here. With an incomparably sorrowful heart, Huang Liang raised his hand. Under everyone's gaze, he waved his hand down. Kill? In the next moment, the cultivators from the three overlord sects took the lead and flew into the air, brazenly charging toward the Blood Tribe's defensive line. Following closely behind the cultivators from the three overlord sects, the cultivators from the various forces of Soaring Dragon Realm also flew up. The battle had begun. 7017K. Chapter 727. On the battlefield with a radius of dozens of miles, the cultivators of the two clans fought with their lives on the line. Blood splattered everywhere and vitality dissipated. In the Soaring Dragon Realm, no cultivator had ever experienced such a grand scene. The number of people involved in a battle between cultivators was usually not too many. The biggest scene that had appeared in the cultivation world of Dragon Ascension was nothing more than a battle between a few sects, and that kind of battle was definitely not to the extent that it would not end until one of them was dead. The number of cultivators involved in this battle was not something that a few sects could compare to. The number of cultivators from the Soaring Dragon Realm alone was more than 100,000. Although the number of blood breeds was not as large as that of the Soaring Dragon Realm, it was not much less. There were at least 70,000 to 80,000. This was no longer a battle. This was a real war. On the battlefield, vitality dissipated almost every moment. The scene was anxious, and it was impossible to tell which side had the upper hand. Lu Yi was mixed in the camp of the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators, cooperating with the cultivators around him to kill the enemy. The Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators had never experienced such a grand scene, and neither had Lu Yi. The biggest scene he had encountered was in the mine last time, when he had faced 20 million Devil Ridge cultivators alone. However, that scene could not be compared to the current one. One side was the invading enemy, and the other side was the self-defense force. The collision between the cultivators of the two sides was like the collision of two monstrous waves. Being in the middle of it, the individual was like a wave created by the collision. They could only go with the flow and could not control themselves at all. Lu Yi was trying his best to reduce his consumption. He did not know how long this battle would last, but a battle of this scale could not be decided in a short time. Therefore, it was important to conserve his own spiritual power while effectively killing the enemy. Moreover, compared to the native cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm, he could also obtain battle merits while killing the enemy. Therefore, he changed the style of a soldier cultivator when fighting the enemy. He made use of every opportunity on the battlefield, shuttling back and forth, and never clashing head-on with the blood breeds. He only focused on one thing: picking up scraps. Every time the Pan Mountain Saber was slashed out, there would be gains. While killing the enemy to obtain battle merits, it could also reduce the pressure on the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Could be said that it was killing two birds with one stone. Adhering to this philosophy, he was constantly obtaining battle merits. Hoopa crouched on Qin Lai's shoulder and blended with his blood essence, allowing him to continuously borrow strength. Yi shuttled through the ground, following closely behind him. She wouldn't easily reveal herself. Only when Lu Yi was in danger would she suddenly appear and strike like a thunderbolt, cooperating with him to kill the enemy. Time passed by and Lu Yi roamed around the battlefield. He had lost count of how many Blood Tribe members he had killed. His entire body was dyed red with blood and the sounds of battle continued to ring in his ears. Everywhere he went, the ground was littered with the severed limbs of cultivators from the two races. While he was killing his enemies, he was also paying attention to the situation at the altar. If he wanted to win this battle, killing all of the blood race was one way. The other way was to destroy the altar. Whether or not they could kill all the vampires wasn't something Lu Yi could control. In such a large-scale battle, the effect he could play on his own was too insignificant. However, he had the opportunity to play a key role in destroying the traction altar. The location of the traction altar was protected by a protective array set up by the blood race. That was why the attacks of the Soaring Dragon Realm spirit boats failed. However, if he could break the protective array, then the attacks of the spirit boats could directly hit the altar. In this way, even if they couldn't kill all of the blood race, the Soaring Dragon Realm could still win this battle. As early as when the array outside the altar was activated, he had been observing the nodes and flaws of the array. To him, it wasn't too difficult to break this array. The real difficulty was how to break through the layers of defense of the blood race and reach the altar. As long as he could reach the altar, he would have a chance to break the array in a dozen breaths of time. However, until now he hadn't found a good opportunity. In this extremely chaotic battlefield, the blood race was especially attentive in guarding the altar. If he dared to rashly approach the altar, he would definitely be targeted by the blood race powerhouses. At that time, even if he had 10 lives, it wouldn't be enough. He still needed time. Lu Yi suppressed the thoughts in his heart and continued to roam the battlefield to kill his enemies. As time passed, the situation slowly became clear. On the battlefield, unexpectedly, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm began to gain the upper hand. Before the battle, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm had heard a lot of news about the blood race from various channels. For a moment they were terrified. However, when they really fought, they realized that although the blood race looked different from humans and were proficient in many strange blood secret techniques, they also had flesh and blood. They would feel pain when they were injured and they would die if their heads were chopped off. For a moment, the fear in their hearts was reduced by more than half. In addition, in these few days, the three overlord sects had been constantly spreading the crisis that the Soaring Dragon Realm was facing and the true intentions of the blood race. This made every cultivator participating in this battle understand the terrible consequences if they were defeated. The blood race was indeed brave and good at fighting, and they were not afraid of death. However, how could the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm, who had no way out, be afraid of death? Behind them was a 10,000 feet high cliff. When the cultivators of a realm were forced into a desperate situation, the cohesion that erupted was extremely terrifying. Moreover, in terms of numbers, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm were much more numerous than the blood race. If there were no losses in the Battle of the Medicine Valley, it would be hard to say who would win this battle. However, in the Battle of the Medicine Valley, the blood race suffered huge losses. On the contrary, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm, who should have been in a desperate situation, were rescued. Under this situation, the Soaring Dragon Realm had the capital to fight against the blood race. Below the ravine, Shueshao floated in the air and looked indifferently at the chaotic and cruel battlefield. He snorted softly. A group of ants that are not bad. When the blood race invaded various realms, most of them were crushed by force. However, there were very few cases where they would encounter fierce resistance from the native cultivators. And to be able to gain the upper hand in such a head-on confrontation was rare. However, it had happened before. Shuexiao's tone was calm, but there was a trace of anger in his expression. It seemed that the bravery of the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm had humiliated him. As the leader of the blood race's invasion of this realm, his efforts and gains in the Soaring Dragon Realm would become his capital to fight for his own position in the blood realm. If he paid too much, it would naturally be disadvantageous to him. Although such a situation was rare, how could the blood race not have a way to deal with it? In the end, it's meaningless. Shuexiao's indifferent voice was driven by spiritual power and spread to every corner of the battlefield. No matter how noisy the fighting was, it could not hide his contempt. As soon as he finished speaking, a sudden change occurred on the battlefield. Somewhere on the battlefield, beside Lu Yi, Yi rushed out from the ground in a panic and said anxiously, "Lu Yi, what kind of array did the blood race set up here?" Before Lu Yi could react, he saw a thick blood-red mist rising from the ground and spreading in all directions. The source of the blood-red mist was the blood of the cultivators who had died in the battle. He even saw a blood-red mist gushing out from the corpse of a blood race not far away from him. As the blood-red mist gushed out, the corpse that he had just beheaded quickly withered as if it had been air-dried for countless years. Previously, the Heavenly Saint had been able to borrow the power of the Blood River Array to resist the combined attacks of Huang Liang and the other two without being moved. He had also been able to use the blood of the dead cultivators of the Heavenly Ravine Sect and the Soaring Dragon Realm to completely activate the Blood River Array and summon the Blood Race. These methods had been imparted by the Blood Race through space. What the Heavenly Saint could use was only the tip of the iceberg. The inexplicable power of the array that the Blood Race had activated was the true essence. Even the dead bodies could be used by the blood race as long as there was still blood in their bodies. In just a dozen breaths, the entire battlefield was shrouded in a blood-red mist. The thick smell of blood was almost tangible and it was nauseating. The blood-red mist was only the prelude. When the blood-red mist filled the entire battlefield, all the blood race became excited. They breathed in greedily, and the blood-red mist entered their bodies through their mouths, noses and pores, making the blood in their eyes thicker. The Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators were shocked to find that after the blood race swallowed the blood-red mist, they seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and their strength increased greatly. If that was all, it would be fine. Being in the blood-red mist, many of the soaring dragon realm cultivators began to hallucinate and feel uneasy. Not only could the blood-red mist increase the blood race's strength, but it also had a strong effect on the soaring dragon realm cultivators' minds. Yi, who had been hiding underground, hurriedly came out because of this. Ordinary power really couldn't do anything to her, but the blood-red mist was everywhere. Even a spiritual body like Yi would be affected. When she sensed that something was wrong, she hurriedly hid back into Hu Po's body. In a moment of carelessness, countless soaring dragon realm cultivators died a violent death. The blood of the dead soaring dragon realm cultivators was also extracted by some kind of power in an extremely short period of time, enriching the blood-red mist. The soaring dragon realm cultivators' original advantage was quickly lost. If there were no accidents, they would be completely defeated in less than an incense's time. At the crucial moment, it was still the three overlord sects that stood out. When the sonorous Buddhist chanting sounded, when the awe-inspiring righteous energy filled the air, and when the Imperial Heaven sect's mysterious secret technique was used, all the soaring dragon realm cultivators' minds seemed to have been cleansed by an extremely gentle power, and all the disadvantages were swept away. Their minds instantly became tranquil, and the hallucinations also disappeared. During peaceful times, it was unknown how many sects were unwilling to acknowledge the position of the three overlord sects, because in terms of individual cultivator strength, almost every sect that could be considered as a sect would have a Cloud River Ninth Order cultivator. The only difference between the three sects was nothing more than numbers. In the Soaring Dragon realm, there were a few sects whose strength was comparable to the Heaven Gorge sect. These sects had always wanted to replace the three overlord sections. If others could take the position of overlord, why couldn't they? But at this moment, in this war that concerned the future of the Soaring Dragon realm, the Soaring Dragon realm cultivators finally understood what an overlord sect was and what a 1,000-year foundation was. 7017K. Chapter 728. Spiritual power surged on the battlefield. Figures intertwined and flickered. The battle was intense. The cultivators of the two clans used many secret techniques and fought back and forth. Xue Xiao, who had been floating in the air and watching the battle, finally lost his composure. The secret technique that the Blood Clan was so proud of did not work as expected. This made him realize that the dragon soaring realm was not so easy to deal with. Really, stubborn. As his voice fell, he had turned into a bloody light and rushed to a certain place on the battlefield. That was the place where the great monks of the Vajra temple gathered. They glared at the Vajra, and at the same time as they fought bravely against their enemies, loud chanting sounds continuously came out of their mouths, dispelling the influence of the Blood Clan's secret technique on the minds of the soaring dragon cultivators. How could Xue Xiao not see that the secret technique of this group of baldies was the most effective against the secret technique of the Blood Clan? So when he attacked, his first target was the Titanium Temple. The bloody light swept over and crashed into the camp of the Titanium Temple. In an instant, it caused an endless massacre. Even though the monks of the Titanium Temple had amazing physiques, they were like paper in front of Xue Xiao. Wherever Xue Xiao passed, he destroyed everything. No one could block his attack. Due to the suppression of the dragon soaring realm, the power that Xue Xiao could use now was only at the peak of the Cloud River realm. However, he was a Divine Sea realm cultivator. He was also the only Divine Sea realm cultivator in the Blood Clan's invasion of the dragon soaring realm. With the strong foundation of the Divine Sea realm, even if he could only use the power of the Cloud River realm, it was not something that ordinary Cloud River realm cultivators could resist. Moreover, the many secret techniques of the Blood Clan that he used were especially effective against those who were full of vitality, such as the monks of the Titanium Temple. Facing an opponent like Xue Xiao, the people of the Titanium Temple could only use 70% of their strength at most. This was the fundamental reason why Xue Xiao was so powerful. Demon, don't be presumptuous. With an angry shout, the overwhelming sword light swept over. The sword light crisscrossed like the strokes of a word. It cut through the void and covered Xue Xiao's head. More sword light swept over. It was Yuan Changsuan from the Haoran Academy who came to help. He had been keeping an eye on Xue Xiao's movements. After all, according to the current information, Xue Xiao was the strongest warrior in the Blood Clan. Long Ting had to pay attention to him. The task assigned before the battle was that once Blood Owl joined the battle, Haoran Academy would be responsible for restraining him and finding a chance to kill him. If Yunhe had killed a Divine Sea Master 1,000 years ago, that would have been impossible no matter what. With the disparity of two large boundaries, the advantage in numbers no longer mattered. But today, 1,000 years later, there was room for manipulation. Due to the suppression of the heavens and earth, even a divine sea realm cultivator like Shuexiao had to abide by the rules of the soaring dragon realm. Beside Yuan Changxuan, there was a group of powerful warriors from the Haoran Academy. There were more than a dozen of them, and all of them were at the peak of the Cloud River realm. They came from the same source and cultivated the same secret technique. Their sword wills were connected, and in an instant they set up a shocking sword array. In the sword formation, the sword light was like an ocean and the waves were sparkling. If ordinary people fell into it, they would be cut into countless pieces even without the sword practitioners of Haoran Academy. However, Shuexiao was indifferent. He just lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, "You ants are jumping around. It's really annoying." Kill. Yuan Changxuan didn't waste time talking nonsense with him. With an order, the sword array exploded. Sword light shuttled back and forth, intertwining and weaving, turning a large area into a land of death. However, the power of the flying sword, which was enough to make any Cloud River realm cultivator unable to deal with it, couldn't cause much damage to Shuexiao. His cultivation was indeed suppressed by the heavens and earth. He could only exert the power of the peak of the Cloud River realm. But his physical body was still at the Divine Sea realm. The body of the Blood Clan was slender, but it didn't mean that their physical bodies were weak. In fact, in the previous confrontation, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon sect had discovered this problem. The physical strength of the Blood Clan was generally stronger than the physique of the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon sect. Some of the Blood Clan's physique was even stronger than the great monks of the Jianghu temple. Just based on the strength of his physical body, Shuexiao was almost invincible. The sharp sword light could only leave some small wounds on his body. And with his strong physique, these wounds could be healed in the blink of an eye. There was nothing more desperate than this, but Yuan Changxuan's expression was still as calm as water. For a sword cultivator like him, his cultivation of the mind was naturally very strong. He had already expected this scene. So after seeing how strong Shuexiao was, he knew that it was unrealistic to kill him. But he could try his best to trap him and prevent him from bringing more casualties to the Soaring Dragon sect. Somewhere on the battlefield, Lu Yi shuttled back and forth, constantly moving closer to the direction of the attraction altar. When Shuexiao made his move, the Blood Clan who stayed near the attraction altar also moved and joined the battle. This caused the defense of the attraction altar to be unprecedentedly weak. To Lu Yi, this was undoubtedly an opportunity. He had been thinking about how to get close to the attraction altar, but he had no clue. Unexpectedly, the opportunity came so suddenly. He knew that this opportunity did not come easily. This was a turning point for the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon sect who fought to the death. It was also the result of the concerted efforts of the three overlord sects, and also the carelessness of the Blood Clan. Perhaps the Blood Clan thought that in a place like the Soaring Dragon realm, no one could break the formation they had set up. Moreover, on the battlefield, the Blood Clan was weak. If they continued to stay near the formation and did not participate in the battle, the situation would only be worse for the Blood Clan. But they did not know that in this chaotic battlefield, there was a pair of eyes that did not belong to the Soaring Dragon realm that had long been fixed on their altar. The journey forward was unexpectedly smooth because no matter where Lu Yi went, there would be cultivators of the Soaring Dragon sect who would charge forward fearlessly to restrain the Blood Clan nearby. He felt something and turned his head to look in one direction. He saw Huang Liang, who was covered in blood, nodding at him. He knew in his heart that Huang Liang was secretly helping him. Huang Liang had always regarded Lu Yi as the savior of the world. He had also seen Lu Ye's attainments and formations. He knew that if there was anyone in this world who could break through the Blood Clan's defensive formation, it would be Lu Yi. Therefore, he had been secretly observing Lu Ye's movements. When Lu Yi began to move, Huang Liang's excitement was indescribable. He immediately ordered the cultivators of the Imperial Heavenly Sect to secretly help Lu Yi and send him to the altar no matter what. Lu Yi and Huang Liang had not discussed this matter beforehand, but at this moment, their cooperation was incomparably close. Under the protection of the many cultivators of the Imperial Heavenly Sect, Lu Yi easily broke through the layers of defense of the Blood Clan and arrived at the periphery of the attraction altar. Even without the Blood Clan guarding this place, the blood-colored light barrier was still operating, firmly enveloping the attraction altar. With this layer of blood-colored light barrier that even the spirit ship's attacks could not do anything to, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon sect could forget about posing any threat to the altar. Standing in front of the blood-colored light barrier, surrounded by many cultivators of the Imperial Heavenly Sect, Lu Yi activated the Insight Spirit Mark to enhance his eyes. With a glance, he had already seen through the nodes and flaws of the defensive formation in front of him. Immediately after, he raised his hand and took out many formation flags. His hands changed seals and spiritual energy surged, shooting the formation flags into the nodes and flaws of the blood-colored light barrier. In the distant sky, Huang Liang, who was watching this scene, couldn't help but feel excited. He had already ordered the spirit ship to prepare to attack the attraction altar at any time. His feeling was right. The tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa's Yi Lu was indeed the savior of the world. At this critical moment, he stood up and brought hope to the soaring dragon sect's cultivation world with his own strength. In front of the blood-colored light barrier, Lu Ye's figure wandered, and a large number of Imperial Heavenly Sect cultivators followed closely behind. Everywhere he went, formation flags were shot into the blood-colored light barrier. It was naturally not an easy task to break through such a large-scale defensive formation. Of course, if it was just to sneak in, it wouldn't be so troublesome. The nearby Blood Clan members clearly sensed Lu Ye's intentions and attacked one after another, but they were all blocked by the Imperial Heavenly Sect cultivators. In a dozen breaths of time, Lu Yi shot hundreds of formation flags into the blood-colored light barrier. Under the influence of those formation flags, the spiritual energy flowing on the blood-colored light barrier became extremely condensed. Although it wasn't to the extent that it completely stopped flowing, the defensive strength was much weaker than before. It was almost enough. Lu Yi could feel a chill behind his back. It was a feeling of great danger shrouding him. The source of the danger was the spirit ship brought by the three overlord sects this time. The spirit ship's attack was already ready and locked onto the direction of the attraction altar. "Let's go!" Lu Yi shouted and led the Imperial Heavenly Sect cultivators to the side. Almost at the instant they left, the formation on the spirit ship that had long been prepared buzzed, and a huge pillar of light attacked like roaring thunder. At this moment, the hearts of all the cultivators who were paying attention to this scene stopped beating. Even those who were in the middle of a bloody battle with the enemy diverted a portion of their attention to the movement at the attraction altar. Needless to say, Huang Liang, who had always been paying attention to this place, was even more so. After living for so many years, he had never been so nervous as today. Under the attention of countless pairs of eyes, the first pillar of light that attacked bombarded the blood-colored light barrier. After withstanding this attack, dense spiderweb-like cracks suddenly appeared on the originally impregnable blood-colored light barrier. Before this blood-colored light barrier had withstood the combined attack of the three spirit ships and was still unscathed. The second pillar of light followed closely behind. Crash. A shattering sound rang in the depths of everyone's hearts. The blood-colored light barrier that enveloped the attraction altar collapsed like a broken mirror. At this moment, Huang Liang was so anxious that he couldn't help but cheer. Success. They actually succeeded. The defensive formation had been broken, and there was no longer any barrier outside the attraction altar. This evil object created by the extraterrestrial visitors was finally going to be destroyed. 7017K. Chapter 729. More light beams broke through the space and bombarded the traction altar. The huge impact swept in all directions. Even though Lu Yi and the others had left in advance, they were still thrown off their feet by the aftermath. Some of the Blood Clan members who were chasing after them were killed on the spot. After stabilizing his body with great difficulty, Lu Yi quickly raised his eyes and looked toward the altar. His expression froze when he saw what he saw. How could this be? In midair, Huang Liang, who was watching this, suddenly changed his expression. The scene that entered his eyes left him in disbelief. After losing the protection of the protective array, the traction altar built by the blood breeds took a round of attacks from the spirit ship without any damage. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. A moment ago, Huang Liang thought that Lu Yi had broken the protective array and the traction altar would be destroyed. But in fact, the strength of the altar was beyond imagination. All the soaring dragon cultivators who were paying attention to the movement of the altar were stunned. "Yuans, what are you waiting for?" Shui Zhao's cold voice sounded. He rolled up a layer of bloody light and attacked the Howran Academy cultivator closest to him. The cultivator was in a trance and could not block Shui Zhao's attack. He was stabbed in the chest and his beating heart was directly pulled out. "Junior brother Qi!" Exclamations sounded. More than 10 Howren Academy powerhouses quickly turned their attention and attacked the enemy with their swords. However, a corner of the sword formation had been broken and they were dealing with a powerhouse like Shuexiao. How difficult would it be to stabilize the formation? For a moment, the sword formation of Howren Academy was in imminent danger. Yuan Changsuan suddenly understood. It turned out that all this was just a pretense. The reason why Shuexiao and the Blood Clan cultivators guarding the altar joined the battle without hesitation was not because they were forced by the situation or because they were careless. It was because the altar itself was indestructible. After all, it was an altar made of materials brought from the Blood World by the Blood Clan. How could it be destroyed so easily? The existence of the protective array was a layer of protection and also a layer of cover. It made Soaring Dragon mistakenly think that as long as the protective array was broken, the altar could be destroyed. But in fact, after the protective array was destroyed, it was the greatest despair. That moment of distraction caused many casualties on Soaring Dragon's side. Coupled with the influence of the inexplicable array set up by the Blood Clan here, the advantage that Soaring Dragon had accumulated in the early stage was gone. However, this was not the most despairing situation. What caused them to feel even more despair was that an extremely unfamiliar aura actually came from the ravine above the altar. Moreover, there were numerous figures faintly floating indeterminately within the ravine, and they seemed as if they would tear through the sky and arrive here at any moment. The altar was constantly guiding the descent of the Blood World, blurring the boundary between the Blood World and the Soaring Dragon realm. Although there was no way to completely guide the Blood World down in a short period of time, the next batch of reinforcements from the blood breeds were already on standby. It wouldn't be long before more blood breeds would descend upon the Soaring Dragon realm. Once such a thing happened, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon would no longer have the power to resist. What awaited Soaring Dragon was only destruction. Attack again. Huang Liang roared. As his voice fell, the spirit ship array outside the battlefield buzzed once more. A moment later, beams of light shot toward the altar and slammed into it. The towering altar only shook slightly, but it remained unscathed. The sturdiness of this altar was beyond the imagination of the Soaring Dragon cultivators. Huang Liang's eyes were bloodshot. This time, without waiting for his order, the third wave of attacks from the spirit ships arrived. Looking down from the sky, one could see thunder-like beams of light sweeping over every few moments, bombarding the altar with great momentum. 5 rounds like this, finally Huang Liang saw hope. On the altar, there were clearly some pits and cracks where the attacks had struck. This altar was indeed sturdy, but it wasn't indestructible. As long as one's power was strong enough, it could still be destroyed. However, just as hope rose in his heart again, a sudden explosion came from outside the battlefield. Huang Liang was shocked. He looked up and saw the spirit ships exploding one by one. It wasn't that the blood breeds had destroyed it. Rather, it was that the array formation on the spirit ship couldn't hold on any longer due to the continuous activation of such powerful attacks. The explosion of the array led to the destruction of the spirit ships. The heavens want Soaring Dragon to die. Huang Liang's heart was like dead ashes. A mouthful of blood surged up his throat and he spat out a mouthful of blood mist. His aura rapidly weakened. There was hope once again, but this hope was cruelly extinguished. Even a person like Huang Liang could not bear the repeated ups and downs of his emotions. Ha 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 ha. Shui Zhao's laughter rang out. He spread his fingers and grabbed the head of a sword cultivator from Howren Academy as if he was carrying a chick. His sarcastic voice spread throughout the battlefield. I have to say, the human clan of your world is qualified to become the blood food of the blood breeds. Resist as much as you can. You won't have this chance in the future. As he spoke, he suddenly exerted force in his hand and crushed the head of the sword cultivator from Howren Academy. He looked up at Yuan Changsuan, knowing that as long as he killed this person, the sword array that was troubling him would be completely broken. Yuan Changsuan was also seriously injured at this moment. There was a large dent in his chest and it seemed that he was hit by a punch. When Shuexiao looked at him, he clearly felt the aura of death enveloping him. With no intention of escaping, Yuan Changsuan just held his sword in front of his chest. His aura blended with the long sword in his hand, and the two became one. As a sword cultivator, in the face of such a calamity, he had no reason to retreat, and it was impossible for him to retreat. Fighting to the death here was his only choice. While the chi was moving as the blood owl was about to attack, an extremely brutal and violent aura suddenly burst out from the altar. It was as if an ancient ferocious beast that had been trapped for thousands of years had suddenly broken free. The boundless and noisy battlefield suddenly quieted down for a moment. Whether it was the blood breeds or the human clan of Soaring Dragon, they all had a creepy feeling in their hearts. It was as if an invisible beast was crouching behind them, sticking out its long scarlet tongue and licking their necks. Xue Xiao, who was indifferent even when he fell into the sword array, finally changed his expression at this moment. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the altar, only to see that there was a scarlet and slender figure in the air over there. That figure was a Yanjia that was about 30 feet tall. The Yanjia was covered with fine scales, and there were two inverted bone spurs at the elbows of his arms, shining with a cold light. Yanjia's head had distinct edges and corners, clearly having been meticulously carved by a top-notch master. It was suffused with a cold metallic luster, and the pair of crimson-red blood eyes on his face reflected a light that caused one to shudder. A strong, wild, and fierce aura spread unscrupulously. The scarlet and slender figure seemed to have become the center of the whole world at this moment. Dragon breath. Xue Xiao frowned. Coming from the blood realm, his knowledge was much more extensive than the Soaring Dragon realm cultivators. The Soaring Dragon realm cultivators could only feel a wild and overbearing aura from the scarlet and slender figure that seemed to want to destroy everything, but Xue Xiao felt another kind of aura. Dragon breath. That was the aura of a true dragon. It was the aura of supremacy in heaven and hell. Yanjia. Xue Xiao was a little confused. It was strange enough for something with dragon breath to appear in such a world, but it was not impossible. After all, a powerful creature like a true dragon could roam the void and appear in any realm. What shocked him was not just the dragon breath, but the Yanjia that suddenly appeared. It was a Yanjia that was made from the body of a true dragon. Who could slay a dragon, and who could use the body of a true dragon to make such a Yanjia? Such a treasure, not to mention the Soaring Dragon realm, even in the blood realm, was rare. This was definitely not something that this realm had. Even if this realm had once produced a divine sea realm cultivator, he was not qualified to make such a divine item. On the other side, Huang Liang stared blankly at the scarlet figure that suddenly appeared and sighed in his heart. In the end, he was still forced to use this item. He knew that the Dragon Emperor was in Lu Ye's hands. If his judgment was correct and Lu Ye was the savior of the world, then the Dragon Emperor was the savior of the world, and also the means of this realm to deal with the calamity. Otherwise, why would the Dragon Emperor appear at this time and coincidentally fall into Lu Ye's hands? But from his point of view, he did not want Lu Ye to use this item. Zhuang Bufan's fate was still vivid in his mind. How could using such a divine item end well? However, when the Soaring Dragon realm had used up all their trump cards and had no other means to deal with the calamity, the Dragon Emperor became their last hope. So he could understand Lu Ye's choice at this moment. In the center of heaven and earth, Lu Ye was wrapped in the scarlet and slender figure. He only felt that his mind was infinitely rising. Whether to use the Dragon Emperor or not was a choice. After witnessing Zhuang Bufan use the Dragon Emperor, Lu Ye knew the burden of such a divine item on the body. But compared to Zhuang Bufan, Lu Ye was more confident in himself. This confidence came from the feeling he had when refining the Dragon Emperor. The entire process of refining the Dragon Emperor was extremely smooth, as if he was not refining a divine item but an ordinary spiritual artifact. In addition, he had always felt that the Dragon Emperor had an inexplicable closeness to him. So he had always thought that perhaps the little fairy doctor was right. The reason Zhuang Bufan had borne such a huge burden and died in the end was because he had not obtained the Dragon Emperor's approval and could not control the Dragon Emperor. Forcibly activating the Dragon Emperor's power naturally did not end well. But if he could obtain the Dragon Emperor's approval, the situation would not be so bad. That being said, Lu Ye did not dare to rashly try, so he had kept the Dragon Emperor in his storage space for the past few days. Until now. The Soaring Dragon realm's spirit ships had all exploded, and there was no longer any way to pose a threat to the traction altar. Under the effect of the traction altar, the next batch of reinforcements from the blood race could arrive at any time. The Soaring Dragon realm had been forced into a desperate situation and had reached a critical juncture that would determine its survival. Lu Ye no longer hesitated and took out the Dragon Emperor and poured his spiritual energy into it. 7017K. Chapter 730. The moment the dragon throne was attached to his body, Lu Ye understood why Zhuang Bufan had only activated it once before he was exhausted. At this moment, his entire body was enveloped by the dragon throne, and every part of his body was tingling with pain. That was not an illusion but a real pain. It was as if the dragon throne had grown countless tiny thorns that could not be seen with the naked eye, piercing into his body from all over. In an instant, Lu Yi felt as if he had been subjected to the most violent torture in the world, and his entire body was sweating profusely. That kind of pain was not only applied to his physical body, but also to his soul. He could clearly feel that the dragon throne was thirstily absorbing everything from his body: spiritual power, physical strength, soul power. His various foundations were flowing away uncontrollably, and the speed was so fast that Lu Yi was shocked. And during this process, his mind was also rising infinitely, as if it had surpassed the shackles of his physical body, and existed in this world in an even more mysterious way. Everything in his vision changed. The figures of the soaring dragon cultivators and the enemies of the blood clan suddenly became insignificant. He knew that it was not that others had become tiny, but that he had become taller. He had seen Zhuang Bufan when he used the dragon throne, and that 30 feet tall figure was filled with an oppressive aura. He could also see a variety of colors flowing in front of his eyes, just like when he activated the Insight Spirit Tattoo to enhance his eyes. Those colorful lights were the colors of different attributes of spirit chi in the world. But this time he did not activate the Insight Spirit Tattoo, and only observed with his naked eyes. What he observed was more detailed than what he could observe with the Insight Spirit Tattoo. The movements of the churning figures around him also became extremely slow. He could clearly see the astonishment, shock, and disbelief in their eyes. He could even clearly see their pupils contracting and enlarging. With the dragon throne on his body, other than the tingling pain all over his body, he did not feel any discomfort. His entire person had perfectly merged with the dragon throne. At this moment he was the dragon throne and the dragon throne was him. He finally understood why Yanshir's sect relied so much on external forces. He also finally understood why Zhuang Bufan's final move was so powerful. The Dragon Emperor was a divine object that could bring unimaginable improvements to a cultivator in all aspects. At this moment, Lu Yi felt his body brimming with power, a power that far exceeded what he should be able to control with his current cultivation. Furthermore, he suddenly raised his head and looked towards a certain direction in the southeast. He could vaguely sense that there was something in that direction that had an extremely close connection with him. In other words, he had an extremely close relationship with the Dragon Emperor. He slowly stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion in that direction as he spat out a word. Come. To the southeast of Soaring Dragon was Gan Province. It was also the location of one of the 3 overlord sects of Soaring Dragon, the Diamond Temple. The Vajra Temple had a long history, and there were many ancient temples in the temple. There was a 33-story tall tower where Grandmaster Fa Hua cultivated. The tower had existed for a very long time, so long that the cultivators of the Vajra Temple had long forgotten the purpose of its existence. In every generation, only the abbot and a few heads inherited the secrets of the tower. Many monks of the Vajra Temple had never been here in their lives, so they naturally did not know of the tower's existence. At this moment, a young novice monk was sweeping the dust in the open space in front of the tower. The young novice monk had red lips and white teeth. He was young and had only been in the temple for 2 years, so his cultivation was weak. Therefore he did not follow the cultivators of the Vajra Temple to the north this time, because a cultivator like him would not be of much use even if he went. The young novice monk swept meticulously, but there was a hint of sadness on his face. He recalled that he had seen the Grandmaster here a few days ago, but it did not take long for him to hear the bad news of the Grandmaster's death in Snow Province. Then more news came from Snow Province, about the invasion of the Blood Clan and the descent of the Blood World. All the senior brothers in the temple who had some strength had gone out to battle. Now, only the young novice monks with low cultivation were left in the huge Vajra temple. He did not know what the future would be, nor did he know if his senior brothers could subdue the demons. He could only do what he could do. After cleaning this place, his senior brothers would definitely praise him when they came back. Almost at the moment when Lu Yi raised his hand, there was a sudden earthquake in the Vajra temple. The young novice monk looked up in shock and saw that the ancient tower with 33 floors in front of him was constantly shaking. Mother! The young novice monk fell to the ground in shock. Just as he was about to flee, his entire body suddenly froze. This was because an extremely ferocious aura had come from below the ancient tower. In a daze, the young novice monk seemed to see a pair of scarlet eyes looking at him. Ouch! The young novice monk, who had never experienced any great storms, could not bear such a look. With a strange cry, he directly fainted on the ground. The next moment, a bloody light seemed to break free from the shackles of the ancient tower and burst out from the bottom of the ancient tower. The light was like a long knife cutting through the air, directly splitting the ancient tower into two. With a rumbling sound, the bloody light soared into the sky and turned into a bloody thunderbolt, sweeping toward the north. On this day, countless creatures in Longting saw the bizarre scene of the bloody light breaking through the sky. In the Vajra temple, only the unconscious young novice monk and the ancient tower that had turned into ruins were left. Snow Province under the ravine. A member of the Blood clan brazenly rushed toward the scarlet figure that was 10 meters tall. Even when he was only 10 meters away from the figure, Lu Yi did not react. The strength of this Blood clan member was comparable to a true Lake Realm cultivator. Although he could only exert the strength of a Cloud River Realm cultivator, he was still not comparable to an ordinary Cloud River Realm cultivator. He could see that the Dragon Emperor was extraordinary, but so what? Although a divine object was good, it could only be used by someone who could control it. With the low cultivation of the creatures in this world, how could they exert the power of such a divine object? As long as he killed the human in this armor, this divine object would belong to the Blood clan. He held a bone spur made from the leg bone of an ancient beast in his hand, and his whole body shone with bloody light. He had used a secret blood technique, and the bone spur in his hand pierced toward the Dragon Emperor's head. Seeing that the enemy in front of him did not move at all, he could not help but cheer in his heart. He had succeeded. His vision suddenly spun, and before he could react, he lost the power to resist. Inside the Dragon Emperor, Lu Ye's expression was indifferent. He reached out and grabbed the Blood clan cultivator's legs, lifting him up like a chicken. The Blood clan's figure was slender and taller than that of a human, but it was only a head taller. In front of the Dragon Emperor, who was 10 meters tall, the difference was like the difference between a grass and a tree. Slow. Too slow. With the Dragon Emperor, Lu Ye's perception had reached an unprecedented level. Against such a powerful Blood clan cultivator with the foundation of a true Lake Realm cultivator, even if Huang Liang and the others attacked, they could only fight to a draw at most. But he just raised his hand and grabbed, and the other party was caught in his hand. His movements were relaxed as if he were catching a mosquito. There were many Blood clan cultivators who were ready to make a move. When they saw this scene, they were all shocked. The Soaring Dragon cultivators did not know how strong the captured Blood clan cultivators were, but the Blood clan was clear. How could such a powerhouse be caught like this without being able to react at all? However, the truth was right before their eyes. Immediately afterward, an even more hair-raising scene took place. Lu Yi merely shook his hand, and a series of bone-cracking sounds rang out from the Blood tribe expert in his grasp. The Blood tribe expert's entire body became as soft as noodles, as soft as cotton. When Zhuang Bufan forcibly activated the Dragon Emperor's power, he had slaughtered the elders of the Heavenly Gorge sect as if they were chickens. Lu Yi had just barely received the Dragon Emperor's acknowledgement, and he could wield a portion of its power. The power he could unleash was even greater than Zhuang Bufan's. So what if this Blood clan cultivator had the foundation of a true Lake Realm cultivator? Setting aside the fact that he could only wield the power of a Cloud River Realm cultivator, even if he could unleash his full power without the restrictions of heaven and earth, he might not be a match for the current Lu Yi. The power of the Dragon Emperor was unimaginably terrifying. Only when one wore the Dragon Emperor would they be able to see how powerful this divine object was. The Blood clan cultivator was casually tossed aside by Lu Yi, and his vitality quickly dissipated. Near the Dragon Emperor, the beings of both races were speechless. The difference was that the Blood clan cultivators all wore expressions of shock and horror, while the Dragon Soaring sect cultivators were bursting with the light of hope. The crimson figure was like a long saber that tore through the haze in their hearts, allowing them to see the dawn of victory. Destroy the altar. Huang Liang's enraged roar traveled down from the sky. However, after killing the Blood clan cultivator who had rushed over to seek his own death, Lu Yi remained standing on the spot, as if he hadn't heard Huang Liang's cry. Destroy the altar. Destroy the altar. Huang Liang yelled at the top of his lungs. Lu Yi remained indifferent. It wasn't that he hadn't heard Huang Liang's words, and it wasn't that he didn't know that he had to destroy the altar. It was just that, the Dragon Emperor was far too taxing on him. Just by wearing this armor alone, he had expended about 80% of his power. This included, but was not limited to, his spiritual power, blood essence power, and consciousness power. Moreover, as time passed, his power continued to deplete. It was just that it wasn't as terrifying as before. He had only attacked just now because he had no other choice, and it was also a form of intimidation. Thanks to Zhuang Bufan's demonstration of the Dragon Emperor's power right before his eyes, Lu Yi had swallowed a large number of spirit pills and 5 drops of soul water before activating the Dragon Emperor. At this moment, his stomach was ringing as the gluttonous feast was operating at an unprecedented rate. He converted the medicinal effects of the spirit pills into spiritual power and used the power of the soul water to replenish his consciousness. He was barely able to keep up with the consumption rate of the Dragon Emperor. However, he still didn't dare to act rashly. He could accept the consumption rate of just standing there, but if he were to take action, the consumption rate would only increase. He was conserving and accumulating his power, and he was also waiting for an opportunity to destroy the altar with a single strike. He was secretly horrified. He had obtained the Dragon Emperor's approval, but his consumption rate was still so terrifying. It was understandable that Zhuang Bufan would end up like that after forcefully activating the Dragon Emperor's power. 7017K. Chapter 731. In front of the altar, a 10-meter-tall scarlet figure stood. Its entire body was suffused with a wild and ruthless aura. It was like a sleeping dragon that was in a state of drowsiness. Huang Liang's roar resounded throughout the battlefield, but after seeing that Lu Yi did not move, he realized that something was wrong. Something must have happened to Lu Yi. Almost at the same time as this thought flashed through his mind, another fierce voice rang out, "Kill him! Kill him quickly!" His tone was full of urgency. It was Xuexiao. As a powerhouse with the foundation of the Divine Sea Realm, he had never taken the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm seriously. Even if he was trapped by the sword formation of the Howren Academy, he was still able to handle it with ease. But when Lu Yi wore the Dragon Throne, he suddenly had a great warning in his heart. That scarlet armor brought him a great sense of threat. This threat was not only a threat that could determine his life and death, but also a threat that could determine the survival of the altar. As a member of the Blood Clan, he was not afraid of death, but the altar could not be destroyed. It was related to the descent of the Blood World. If the altar was destroyed, then all his previous efforts would be in vain, and the descent of the Blood World would be greatly delayed. With such a crime, even if he was still alive, he would inevitably suffer a punishment worse than death. Therefore, he must quickly kill the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivator wearing the Dragon Throne armor. Huang Liang saw that something was wrong with Lu Yi, and so did Xuexiao. Otherwise, there was no reason for him to stand there and not move after using such a divine object. This was undoubtedly the best opportunity to kill Lu Yi. He wanted to go in person, but the sword cultivators of the Howren Academy led by Yuan Changzuan were desperately entangling him. Even if he used all kinds of mysterious secret skills of the Blood Dao, he could not escape for a while unless he killed Yuan Changzuan and the others first. With Xuexiao's order, many members of the Blood Clan seemed to wake up from a dream and rushed in the direction of Lu Yi. Lu Yi, who stood there quietly, finally moved. He just casually raised his hand and kicked, and one by one the powerful and fierce members of the Blood Clan died. His movements looked very simple, but none of the Blood Clan could avoid it. From afar, it looked like a group of naughty children were provoking a tall and mighty adult. No matter how the children bared their fangs and brandished their claws, it was meaningless. The scene looked both comical and bloody. All of the Blood Clan members who rushed over either exploded and died, or were sent flying backward like arrows with broken bones and tendons. On the Dragon Throne, Lu Yi silently sensed. Even though he was wearing a 3-zhang tall armor, making his entire body seem to have transformed into such a colossus, he didn't feel too much discomfort. All of his movements were as smooth and natural as an extension of his arm. With the Dragon Emperor on him, he was the Dragon Emperor, and the Dragon Emperor was him. Every part of the 10-meter-tall armor was an extension of his body. The only thing that made him a little uncomfortable was that something was missing from his hand. All this time he had always fought with the Panshan saber and rarely fought with his bare hands. Naturally, he felt a little uncomfortable. Of course, he could summon the Panshan saber, but if he wielded it with his 10-meter-tall body, it would be incongruous. He might as well fight with his bare hands. Fortunately, once mastered, battle techniques would be engraved in the depths of one's soul. Thus, even if he didn't have a saber in his hand, he would at most feel a little empty. It didn't affect him too much. Hold on. Huang Liang's angry roar rang out again. He personally charged over, leading a group of soaring dragon cultivators to surround Lu Yi and relieve him of the pressure. Previously, Lu Yi had ignored his cries, so he thought that something had happened to Lu Yi. But now it seemed that there was nothing wrong with Lu Yi. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to fight back against the Blood Clan. However, Lu Ye's actions made him understand the root of the problem. This was because Lu Ye had been using the simplest method to kill the Blood Clan members. None of his movements were superfluous. He clearly didn't want to waste his strength. Huang Liang had a vague guess, but he wasn't too sure. He didn't have the time to ask. Since Lu Ye wanted to conserve his strength, he could only cooperate. In an instant, humans and Blood Clan members swarmed over where Lu Ye was. They clashed, spiritual energy surged chaotically, and killing moves were launched one after another. The focus of the battle had suddenly shifted like this. None of the powerhouses of the two clans had expected this. At this moment, Lu Ye had truly become the center of the world. One side was attacking and the other side was defending. Both sides were doing their best. Fresh lives withered like withered leaves in this vast area. Corpses flew out one after another, turning into broken limbs and minced meat. In the ravine, the blood-red light became even denser. The aura that was extremely unfamiliar to the soaring dragon cultivators continued to pervade the air. Lu Ye stood in place, not participating in the battle between the two clans. The moment he put on the dragon throne and his mind rose infinitely, he felt the source of the aura. It was the aura of another world, the aura of the blood realm. It was filled with a sense of evil invasion. In the ravine, there were countless figures churning in the blood-red light. Those were even more Blood Clan powerhouses. Under the influence of the altar, they could descend to Soaring Dragon at any time. He had to hurry. As if it had sensed his thoughts, the blood-red light that had emerged from the Vajra temple suddenly sped up. Wherever it passed, it left a clear mark in the air that lingered for a long time. In troubled times, human lives were like grass. Even cultivators who had achieved success in their cultivation could not escape this fate. Every moment, there were Soaring Dragon cultivators dying by Lu Ye's side. Even a top powerhouse like Huang Liang was seriously injured. Yet, he still killed his enemies while bathed in blood and did not leave Lu Ye's side. The Blood Clan attacked several times, but they could not tear apart the Soaring Dragon cultivators' line of defense. Shui Zhao's yells rang out continuously, no longer as calm as before. In the void, the Blood Clan thought highly of themselves. They never put other clans in their eyes, especially the naturally weak human race. In the eyes of the Blood Clan, this race was the lowest of the low. However, after seeing the power gathered by the Soaring Dragon cultivators, even the Blood Clan had to admit that the naturally weak human race could sometimes display unimaginable resilience and tenacity. This was a characteristic that many clans in the void did not possess. It was also a characteristic that many clans envied. Is it not done yet? In the midst of the chaos, Huang Liang asked loudly. Right away. Lu Ye's response came from the dragon throne. He could clearly sense the distance between him and the blood-red light that was heading north. After receiving Lu Ye's reply, Huang Liang's heart was at ease. He knew that his previous guess was right. Lu Ye did not make much movement. He was saving his strength. He was waiting for that thing. That thing that had been suppressed by the Titanium Temple for 2,000 years. Many of his fears and uneasiness were swept away. Huang Liang only felt great hope rising in his heart. Even if he was seriously injured, he could not help but be filled with anticipation. However, this anticipation was shattered in the next moment. He suddenly looked up and saw the blood-red light rolling in the ravine. The scene of the river of blood once again appeared. As the river of blood tilted, the silhouettes of the Blood Clan charged out from it. The Blood Clan's reinforcements had arrived. Huang Liang was not the only one who saw this scene. Every Soaring Dragon cultivator who saw this scene could not help but feel despair. With the current Blood Clan alone, they had no certainty of victory. Now that the Blood Clan had received reinforcements, how could the Soaring Dragon cultivators resist? Many Blood Clan members rushed out from the river of blood in the ravine. Each of them had a vigorous aura. Without a word, they rushed down and joined the battle. One of the Blood Clan members, who looked a little old, stood in the air with his hands behind his back. His gaze swept across the battlefield and he snorted softly. Blood Owl, you're still so useless. An annoyed Blood Owl who was being harassed by Yuan Changsuan and the others gritted his teeth and shouted, Cut the crap. Take down Yanjia first. He's a variable. The old Blood Clan member said indifferently, I don't need you to teach me how to do things. He shifted his gaze and looked at Lu Ye, who was wearing the dragon throne. He said softly, Kill him. His tone was calm, as if the one he wanted to kill was just a mosquito. A large number of Blood Clan reinforcements rushed over. The defensive line that the Soaring Dragon cultivators gathered around Lu Ye was in imminent danger. Several gaps were torn open. Many Blood Clan members rushed toward Lu Yi through the gaps. Lu Yi, who had been standing in place and trying not to make any unnecessary movements, suddenly raised a hand. As he raised his hand, the wind and clouds changed color. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, lightning swam, and a terrifying heavenly might enveloped the earth. Be it humans or vampires, everyone on the chaotic battlefield could clearly see that giant hand, regardless of whether they were paying attention to this place or not. The old Blood Clan member who had just arrived in Soaring Dragon felt his heart skip a beat. He vaguely sensed an extremely violent aura rushing toward him from a certain direction. He hurriedly raised his head and saw an extremely bizarre scene at a glance. In the southeast direction, a blood-red streak streaked through the air and cut a scar in the sky that didn't heal for a long time. What's that? The old Blood Clan member frowned and looked in that direction. In the next moment his expression changed drastically. He seemed to have seen the shadow of a ferocious dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The aura in the blood-red light was of the same origin as the aura of Yanjia below. Although the old Blood Clan member didn't quite understand what was going on, he knew that he couldn't let this blood-red light near the battlefield. He immediately leaped and rushed toward the blood-red light. Before he even arrived, a blood mist filled his body and turned into a sea of blood. The sea of blood seemed to have a mind of its own as it surged toward the blood-red light, enveloping it tightly in an instant. The Blood Clan's secret technique had an extremely strong corrosive effect on the spirituality of spirit tools and the protective spirit energy of cultivators. The old Blood Clan member didn't hesitate to use the secret technique that consumed his own body. No matter what it was, as long as it had spirit energy, it would fall into his control and then be corroded. However, in the next moment, a miserable scream came from the sea of blood, 7017K. Chapter 732. The crimson light that came from the southeast of Soaring Dragon rushed into the blood sea. Without any pause, it pierced through the blood sea and created a vacuum. A blood-curdling scream rang out, and the vast sea of blood abruptly withdrew, revealing the old Blood Clan member's figure. However, this old Blood Clan member who had been commenting on Shui Zhao's appearance and had an insufferably arrogant appearance, seemed to have suffered a heavy injury at this moment. There was a wound on his waist and his flesh and blood were churning. Fresh blood flowed out, causing his face to pale and his eyes to tremble. What's that? The old Blood Clan member was in disbelief. Like Shui Zhao, he was a divine sea realm cultivator. Although he was limited by the heaven and earth when he came to this world, he could only exert the power of the peak of the Cloud River realm. But with the foundation of the divine sea realm, he knew that in a world like the Soaring Dragon realm, there was nothing that could hurt him. This was also why he dared to intercept the crimson light. But he never thought that he would be severely injured as soon as he appeared. If he had not reacted quickly, he would have been killed. How could there be such a ferocious thing in such a world? He looked up and finally saw the true body of the crimson light. A saber. It was a long saber that seemed to be made of fresh blood. The body of the saber was not flat. Every inch of the saber had a node that was slightly bulging. The crimson light flowed on the saber. The saber seemed to have a life of its own. It breathed in and out as the crimson light flowed. Between breaths, an endless ferocious aura suddenly filled the air. And this long saber was in the hands of the tall and slender figure at this moment. The aura of the armor and the saber blended into one. Even those who saw them for the first time could clearly tell that these two divine objects came from the same source. Dragon's spine. The old Blood Clan member's expression changed. When he arrived here, he only cared about mocking his old enemy Shui Zhao. He did not pay much attention to the armor of the Dragon Emperor. Until now, when the long saber entered his eyes, the old Blood Clan member felt the mystery contained in it. The tall and slender scarlet figure was filled with a pure dragon's breath. It was clearly made from the body of a true dragon. As for the long saber with nodes, it was made from an entire dragon's spine. The bulging nodes were the nodes of the dragon's spine. There was an explosion in his mind. The old blood descendant's expression changed abruptly. He finally understood why Shui Zhao had failed in this realm. Dragon Spine Blade. Yuan Changtsuan, who was covered in wounds, was fighting the blood owl with his junior brothers. He glanced at the blood-red long saber in Lu Ye's hand and recognized that it was exactly the same as the one recorded in the academy. He immediately realized that this monster had also appeared. On the other side of the battlefield, Guangjing chanted Buddha's name as a complicated look flashed across his eyes. There were two pieces of the dragon throne. One was the Dragon King Kai and the other was the Dragon Spine Blade. In the entire Soaring Dragon realm, there were less than 10 people who knew of this secret. Everyone thought that the Dragon Throne was the Dragon King Kai, but that was actually a mistake. More than 2,000 years ago, when the Dragon Spine Saber was born, it was sealed by the Titanium Temple until today. Now that the Dragon Spine Saber had appeared and was summoned at such a time, it was obvious that the Dragon Throne had recognized its master. Beside the altar, the moment the long saber appeared in his hand, an endless violent aura filled the air. If Lu Yi, who was wearing the Dragon Throne before, was like a sleepy dragon, then the moment the Dragon Spine Saber appeared in his hand, this evil dragon was completely awakened. The Blood Descendants who had just broken through the Soaring Dragon cultivator's defensive line and rushed to Lu Ye's side had yet to react when they came face to face with the violent aura. It was as if they had crashed into an invisible wall. Their figures flew out at a speed faster than when they came. Even the Soaring Dragon cultivators who were guarding Lu Yi were affected. In an instant, there was nothing left within a radius of 100 feet where the Dragon Throne was. With the power of the Dragon Throne alone, Lu Yi was not confident that he could destroy the altar in one blow. Therefore he had not made any big moves before. Even when Huang Liang shouted himself hoarse, he did not move. He was waiting for the arrival of the Dragon Spine Saber. Now the moment had finally arrived. With the long saber in his hand, he suddenly felt different. It was as if his whole person had become complete. Lu Yi turned around and raised the Dragon Spine Saber high in his hand. He crazily urged his strength. At this moment he actually felt as if he was blessed by the heavens, as if the entire Soaring Dragon realm was standing behind him as his shield. The wind and clouds changed color, and the dark clouds that had gathered in the sky became denser. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and the sound of thunder was deafening. The long saber that was raised high formed a wonderful resonance with this side of the world. Lu Yi knew that this was not an illusion but a fact that was happening. The Soaring Dragon realm also realized that the success or failure of this battle depended on this one move, so they did not hold back and allowed him to borrow power. Lu Ye's mind was once again raised infinitely. A great confidence was born in his heart. He could cut. Under this saber, no matter what it was, as long as it was in this side of the world, it could be cut. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the blood-red long saber slashed down heavily in the direction of the altar. It was difficult to describe the power of this saber. When the long saber fell, there was no sound, but everything between heaven and earth seemed to be cut off. The world lost its color, and everything fell silent. Sound, color, and perception all disappeared, and all vision was reflected in the simple and unadorned saber. It seemed like an instant but also like millions of years. Boom! When a loud noise was heard, a blood-red saber light suddenly burst out. The saber light cut through the Blood Clan's altar, and the seemingly indestructible altar was cut in half like a piece of tofu. The blood-red saber light did not lose its momentum and rushed straight into the sky, slashing toward the sloping river of blood under the ravine. At this moment, there were still a large number of blood breeds swarming out of the ravine. However, when the saber light struck, no matter how profound the blood breeds were, they all vanished like smoke in the wind. The river of blood that was pouring down was completely evaporated by this saber light. The saber light rushed into the ravine and slashed into the blood realm. Faintly, there seemed to be a muffled groan coming from the blood realm. It was unknown who was injured by the saber light. The dark clouds in the sky dissipated, and the scorching sun hung high in the sky. When the dust settled, the cultivators of the two clans could not recover for a long time, still immersed in the terrifying power of the saber. Before this, no one knew that there was someone in this world who could slash out such a saber. The ravine was still there, but the unfamiliar aura coming from it was much fainter. This undoubtedly showed that the Blood Realm's attachment to the Soaring Dragon realm had weakened. Kill the enemy. A roar was heard, but Huang Liang was the first to recover. There was light again in a desperate situation, and this time, it was a light that would not be extinguished. The altar had been destroyed, and the Blood Clan members who came to support had suffered heavy casualties under the saber. Whether the Soaring Dragon realm could survive today would depend on the next battle. Many Soaring Dragon cultivators shouted as they charged towards the nearby blood breeds with all their might, completely disregarding their own injuries and exhaustion. With the altar destroyed and the support cut off, the Blood Clan finally panicked. With the Blood Realm as their backing, they could be unscrupulous, but at this moment, they clearly felt that their connection with the Blood Realm had become extremely weak. This was the fundamental reason why they were so panicked. In front of the altar, Lu Yi held his saber and did not move. That saber had not only drained his own strength, but even the spiritual power accumulated in the storage ring on his hand had disappeared. He could even feel that a large amount of his life force had been drained. The Dragon Emperor was ferocious, and this ferocity was not only reflected in its power against the enemy, but also in its suppression of the user. Under normal circumstances, cultivators used their own strength to control spirit weapons. Once their strength was exhausted, they would not be able to unleash the power of the spirit weapon. But the Dragon Emperor was different. Even if the user's strength was exhausted, it would continue to absorb anything it could, such as life force or the power of the soul. If Lu Yi had not been holding back and accumulating his own strength, he would have died from exhaustion even if he could have slashed out with that saber. But this sacrifice was worth it. The altar was destroyed, the Blood Clan members who came to support had suffered heavy casualties, and the Blood Realm's attachment had weakened. The Soaring Dragon Realm now had the capital to fight against the Blood Clan. Not to mention the various benefits to the Soaring Dragon Realm for the time being, Lu Yi himself also had many mysterious insights in his heart. If he were to meditate in seclusion at this moment, it would certainly make great progress in his saber technique. In addition, he was more aware of one thing. This side of the world had its own will. Perhaps that will was still in a hazy state, but it was indeed a will. Because when he swung out with that saber, he could clearly feel that the whole world was borrowing power from him. Otherwise, his saber could have broken the altar, but it would have never weakened the Blood Realm's attachment to the Soaring Dragon Realm. It was precisely because of the borrowing power of the world that the saber had such a terrifying power. For example, when Lu Yi swung the saber, it was as if there was an invisible figure standing behind him, holding the dragon spine saber with him and slashing out with the saber. And that invisible figure was the hazy will of this side of the world. Before this, Lu Yi only had a few conjectures about such an inconceivable matter. But now this conjecture was confirmed. In this way, many things that he did not understand before could finally be explained. For example, the heavenly secrets of the 9 regions. If the Soaring Dragon Realm had its own hazy will, then what about the 9 regions? The mysteries of heaven were everywhere, affecting the survival and cultivation of every cultivator in the 9 regions, and had even evolved into such wonderful things as meritorious deeds and battle achievements. The will of the 9 regions was probably much more mature than that of the Soaring Dragon Realm. In comparison, it was completely the difference between an adult and a fetus. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Yi looked up and saw the scene of the fierce battle between the cultivators of the 2 realms. Although he had broken the altar and weakened the Blood Realm's attachment to the Soaring Dragon Realm, which could greatly delay the arrival of the Blood Realm and make the Blood Clan no longer have the strength to support them, the battle was not over yet. 7017K. Chapter 733. With Lu Ye's attack, the Dragon Soaring Realm only had the ability to fight against the Blood Clan. Judging from the situation, the Blood Clan still had the upper hand. He looked up and saw that Guangjing was fighting with the Heavenly Saint. They were evenly matched. The monk's Vajra eyes were filled with anger. The Kasaya on his body was torn open, revealing his firm muscles. His chi of blood was boiling as he displayed his ability to subdue demons. He saw that the swordsmen of Howran Academy were struggling to hold on, and Xuexiao was shuttling back and forth in the sword formation. He also saw that in the distance, the old Blood Clan member who had come to Dragon Soaring Realm was looking at him with fear. At a glance, he could see everything that was happening on the battlefield that covered a radius of dozens of miles. Even though Lu Yi was extremely exhausted, his strength completely depleted, and he wanted nothing more than to fall asleep, he knew that he couldn't sleep yet. He had already come this far. If he did not do his best, it would be a pity. In the sword formation of Howran Academy, the sword chi crisscrossed. Xuexiao gritted his teeth and roared. This invasion of Dragon Soaring Realm was a complete failure. No matter what decision the Blood World would make, his failure was irrefutable. He was too ashamed to return to the Blood World. Dying in battle here was his only and best choice. With such a thought, Xuexiao completely gave up his defense, and beat Yuan Changsuan and the other swordsmen into a mess. When there were more than 10 of them, they could not do anything to Xuexiao. Now there were only a few left and all of them were injured. How could they resist? In front of Xuexiao's desperate stance, they could not hold on for long. However, no one retreated. The swordsmen would rather break than bend. In the face of such a strong enemy, they could only fight with their lives on the line. All of you will die, Xuexiao shouted. After fighting with his life on the line, he finally found a good opportunity to approach Yuan Changsuan. He was so fast that no one could stop him in time. Shui Xiao stretched out his hand, and his sharp fingers pierced into Yuan Changsuan's chest, grabbing his heart. Headmaster. The swordsmen nearby were all shocked. They wanted to come to his rescue, but how could they make it in time? Seeing that Yuan Changsuan was about to lose his life here, Shui Xiao suddenly froze. An indescribable sense of danger shrouded him as if it was real. Under that thick and sticky sense of danger, it was extremely difficult for him to even move a finger. Before he could react to what had happened, he felt a slight pain in his neck and lost consciousness. The big hand that was holding Yuan Changsuan's heart also lost its strength. Taking advantage of such a good opportunity, Yuan Changsuan's body surged with sword light. The sharp sword qi cut the blood owl into countless pieces. Blood splattered everywhere and rained down. Looking at the scarlet figure standing behind Shui Xiao and gently swinging his saber, Yuan Changsuan had a grateful expression on his face. He knew in his heart that if Lu Yi hadn't come to his aid in time, he would already be dead by now. Blood Owl's back was facing Lu Yi, so he did not see what had happened. But he was facing Lu Yi, so he did not see it clearly either. Because at the critical moment of life and death, Lu Yi, who was wearing the dragon throne, appeared in front of him. That kind of bizarre speed had already surpassed the limits of what the cultivators of this realm could achieve. It was not something that a Cloud River tier cultivator could catch. In the blink of an eye, the scarlet figure had already disappeared. It was as if he had never appeared. However, in a battlefield a few miles away, the heavenly saint's screams suddenly rang out. Yuan Changsuan turned his head to look and saw the head of the person who caused the soaring dragon realm's crisis being separated from his body. That slender scarlet figure flashed in Yuan Changsuan's vision and disappeared once again. Dozens of miles away from the battlefield, an old member of the Blood Clan was running for his life. He had even activated the secret escape technique of the Blood Clan and desperately burned his blood essence. That shocking saber strike that could cut through the Blood River had really frightened him. If he could still exert the cultivation of the Divine Ocean tier, he could try to fight against that saber strike. But now he only had the foundation of the Divine Ocean tier. How could he block that saber strike? In his perception, the connection between the Blood Realm and this realm had become weak. So he made a prompt decision to activate his secret technique to escape. But the sense of danger in his heart did not weaken because he was far away from the battlefield. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. He felt cold all over. That was the reaction of his body caused by the trembling of his divine soul. Even though he knew that he should not look back at this time, he could not help but turn his head to look back. With one glance, the old member of the Blood Clan looked desperate. In his field of vision, the scarlet figure was approaching him at an unimaginable speed. When he looked at it, it was still far away. In the blink of an eye, it was already halfway there. Another breath. It was close to him. "I'll fight you to the death." The old member of the Blood Clan was also a courageous person. Knowing that he could not escape, he immediately turned around. His strength surged and his blood essence wriggled. Suddenly he split into three. This was obviously an extremely mysterious doppelganger technique. Just by looking at it with the naked eye, the three old members of the Blood Clan were exactly the same. Even their auras were the same. It was as if he could really split into three. Each of the three old members of the Blood Clan had his own full strength. One of them rushed directly toward Lu Yi, while the other two flanked him from the left and right. In the face of the old member of the Blood Clan, Lu Yi, who was running all the way, only gently waved the dragon spine saber in his hand. The faint roar of a dragon resounded through heaven and earth. The blood-red arc of the saber slashed through the void. It slashed out from the dragon spine saber and spread outward. The three figures that rushed over did not have any ability to block or dodge at all. They were cut in half by the arc of the saber. Two of them turned into blood essence and disappeared. The one on the right remained. That was the old member of the Blood Clan. The neatly cut lower body fell to the ground, while the upper body was still suspended in mid-air. The internal organs of the wound were mixed with blood and spilled into the sky. Looking at the slender scarlet figure, the old member of the Blood Clan sighed softly. It's not the fault of war. This time, the Blood Clan's invasion of the Dragon Ascension realm could not be said to be inadequate. After 800 years of dependence, the cultivation world of the Dragon Ascension realm was in a decline. With the help of the Heavenly Gully sect, it could be said that the progress was perfect. Logically speaking, it would not take long for the Blood Clan to occupy the Dragon Ascension realm. The Blood Realm could also devour the essence of the entire realm. But who would have thought that a completely unreasonable monster would suddenly appear out of the blue? cultivators themselves were limited by heaven and earth. They could only exert a corresponding amount of strength. However, the restrictions of an external object like the dragon spine armor did not come from heaven and earth, but from the cultivator. What's more, it was an armor made from the body of a true dragon and a long blade made from the spine of a true dragon. Such things should not have appeared in the soaring dragon realm, and no one should have been able to wield them. The old member of the Blood Clan was dead, but the battlefield in the distance was still fierce. However, Lu Yi, who had killed the old member of the Blood Clan, was completely exhausted. His consciousness was hazy and he could faint at any time. With a slight thought, the Dragon King armor on his body quickly retracted. Pieces of scales gathered and shrank, separating from Lu Ye's body. It turned back into an inconspicuous ball the size of a baby's head and fell to the ground. The dragon spine saber was also inserted into the ground until the hilt was visible. At the last moment of his consciousness, Lu Yi reached into the spirit beast pouch at his waist and released Hupa. After that, he fell unconscious again. Before using the Dragon Emperor, Lu Yi had already informed Yi about this, and he had also predicted what might happen next. So when Hooper appeared, Yi flashed out and saw Lu Ye's current state, knowing that his prediction had come true. Despite her panic, Yi quickly picked up Lu Yi, put away the dragon throne, and summoned her spirit boat. Carrying Lu Yi and Hoopa, she rushed in the direction of the Medicine Valley. Looking at the current Dragon Ascension realm, only the fairy doctor could save Lu Yi. As for the outcome of the distant battle, it was no longer Yi's concern. Lu Yi had risked half his life to break the altar, destroy the blood river, weaken the connection between the two realms, and at the last moment, kill the two strongest members of the Blood Clan. If the Dragon Ascension realm still lost with such a foundation, it could only be said that there was no hope for this realm. Yi had never raised the speed of her weapon to such a high level, but even so, she felt that it was too slow. In her arms, Lu Ye's vitality was weak, like a candle flame in the wind, about to be extinguished at any time. Lu Ye's current condition was very similar to Zhuang Bufan's back then. Compared to Zhuang Bufan's condition, it was even worse. Although the Dragon Throne had recognized Lu Yi as its master and allowed him to control part of its power, what he had done today was much more exhausting than what Zhuang Bufan had done back then. Zhuang Bufan had only tried to use the Dragon Throne once, and his life was about to end. What would happen to Lu Yi now? In the distance, the Medicine Valley was in sight. In front of the valley, two figures seemed to be waiting. It was the fairy doctor and Yi Lioli who had stayed behind. Yi landed on the ground and pleaded in a weak tone that she had never used before, "Senior, please save Lu Yi." In her desperation, she had completely forgotten Lu Ye's identity in this realm. "I already know." The fairy doctor nodded. She had been waiting here for Lu Yi. When Yi Lioli saw Lu Ye's current state and recalled the last moments of Zhuang Bufan's life, she couldn't help but cover her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had been destroyed, and only she and Lu Yi were left in the family. If anything happened to Lu Yi, she would really be all alone. Great sorrow surged from her heart, almost drowning her. Her mind shook violently as if a seal in her body had been broken. Many inexplicable messages surged in her mind, attacking her weak divine soul. Ilioli let out a soft cry and fell to the ground. The sudden turn of events stunned Yi, but she still instinctively supported Yi Lioli and followed the fairy doctor into the medicinal valley. The battlefield under the ravine had gone through several days and nights of fierce fighting. When all the dust had settled, the battlefield was littered with the corpses of cultivators from the two clans, and the ground under the ravine was dyed red with blood. Everyone who was still alive was covered in wounds and their eyes were bloodshot, but their tired expressions still couldn't hide the excitement in their hearts. "We won." Somewhere on the battlefield, a soft murmur came out. "We won." More voices responded. Then they turned into earth-shaking shouts and roars. "We won." In this battle, the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon clan had won a Pyrrhic victory. 7017 K. Chapter 734. Cultivators went in and out of the Medicine Valley. Many of them looked exhausted and injured, but they still couldn't rest. Those who could walk on their own were still in good condition. Most of them were missing arms and legs, and some were so seriously injured that they couldn't get out of bed. In the next bloody battle, the invading blood breeds were wiped out, but the Soaring Dragon realm had also paid an unimaginable price. Throughout the recorded history of the Soaring Dragon realm, there had never been such a large-scale battle with such heavy casualties. In front of the straw hut, Lu Yi sat weakly on the chair that Zhuang Bufan used to sit on. His lower body was covered with a thick animal skin blanket, and he coughed lightly from time to time. The fairy doctor was beside him, checking on his injuries. After killing the old blood breeds in the battle that day, Lu Yi fell into a coma and only woke up yesterday. This was the result of the fairy doctor using all her methods. Otherwise he would have been in a deep sleep for a long time, and might even have died in his sleep. Although he had woken up now, his body's condition was extremely bad. There were no injuries on his body, but Lu Yi could feel an unprecedented weakness. It was as if his entire body had been drained dry. He was a young man less than 20 years old, but at this moment his face showed some signs of aging and even his hair was white. Yi Lioli and Huang Liang stood at the side, waiting nervously. After a long time, the fairy doctor withdrew her hand from Lu Ye's wrist and stuffed his hand back into the animal skin blanket. "Senior, how is he?" Yi asked nervously. Huang Liang also looked over, his heart in his throat. The fairy doctor glanced at Lu Yi and Lu Yi said weakly, "There's no harm in saying it. I know my own body best." The fairy doctor nodded and said, "His life is saved for the time being." Yi was not happy but even more nervous. She heard the unfinished words in the fairy doctor's words, "For the time being?" His body is severely weakened, so although his life is saved for the time being, no one can say what will happen in the future, the fairy doctor explained. In fact, according to her diagnosis, Lu Yi probably wouldn't live for more than a month in this state. And this was the result of Lu Yi swallowing a large number of spirit pills and 5 drops of soul water before using the Dragon Emperor. If he hadn't made these preparations, the slash with the Dragon Emperor would have been enough to drain his life force in one go. The cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm were limited by the world, and could only cultivate to the peak of the Cloud River tier now. Even invaders like the Blood Breeds couldn't unleash power beyond this tier. However, an external power like the Dragon Emperor wasn't restricted. The only restriction it faced was the cultivator itself. Beneath the Heavenly Gorge altar, the saber strike that Lu Yi had unleashed had far surpassed the standard of a Cloud River tier cultivator. Thus, it was naturally impossible that he hadn't paid a price. But now it seemed that this price was unbearable. "If the body is empty, can't it be nourished?" He asked nervously. "We have many pills that can nourish the body. Alright, we also have real dragon scales and soul water. You can use them all." Dragon scales replenished blood, and soul water replenished divine sense. In Yi's opinion, since Lu Ye's body was weakened, they just had to find a way to replenish it. The fairy doctor sighed, shook her head and said, "The world has a source and so do people. Take this realm for example. The blood realm has been sucking for 800 years, and the soaring dragon realm source has been drained greatly, causing the upper limit of the cultivator's cultivation level to continuously decrease. Unless the source of this realm can be replenished, it will be impossible to recreate the glory of 800 years ago. Lu Ye's body is in the same situation. His deficiency is not something that can be replenished with ordinary things." "Senior, you don't have a way?" Yi was about to cry. "I am powerless." If she had the ability, Zhuang Bufan wouldn't have had to die that day. Lu Ye's present situation was exactly the same as Zhuang Bufan's. His remaining life force could only maintain his life for a short period of time, and it wouldn't be too long. The fairy doctor left, and Yi knelt in front of Lu Yi crying loudly. However, she was a spirit and no matter how sad she cried, no tears flowed out. The sorrow in her heart couldn't be vented. Hu Po's mood was also unprecedentedly low. He crouched at the side, his tiger eyes dim. Seeing this scene, Huang Liang sighed, "Little friend, rest well first. I will come back to visit you later." His previous feeling was right. The young man in front of him was really a savior. When the Soaring Dragon Realm's cultivation world was at its most desperate, he was the one who wore the dragon throne and cut through the haze, bringing light to the Soaring Dragon Realm. However, looking at Lu Ye's current state, Huang Liang's heart was filled with a bitter taste. Should the savior of the world pay such a heavy price? He was still a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. He had saved the world, so who could save him? Even the little fairy doctor was unable to do anything. In this world there was probably no one who could help him. "Senior, please wait." Lu Yi gently patted Yi's trembling shoulder and looked at Huang Liang. "I want to know what the situation is over at Tianhe." Huang Liang hesitated slightly. "Little friend, after paying such a heavy price, I think I still have the right to be concerned." Huang Liang couldn't help but sigh. Lu Yi had already said so much. If he still refused, it would seem a little unreasonable. Immediately he explained everything that he knew about the situation. In the battle that day, the blood breeds that invaded the blood world were exterminated, and the traction altar was destroyed as well. Thanks to the sword that borrowed power from the heavens and earth, even the blood world's attachment to the soaring dragon realm became much weaker. However, things weren't over yet. Jianghu was still there, and the blood realm was still attached to the soaring dragon realm, so the root of the problem hadn't been solved. For the time being, the blood breeds couldn't invade the soaring dragon realm. However, as time passed, once the connection between the two realms became closer, the blood breeds would definitely make a comeback. Moreover, in the process of the blood realm attaching itself to the soaring dragon realm, it was constantly absorbing the foundation of the soaring dragon realm, which was the world's origin that the fairy doctor mentioned. Therefore, even if the blood breeds didn't invade in the future, the problem of the blood realm's attachment couldn't be solved, and the soaring dragon realm would gradually be destroyed. In order to guard against the possible invasion of the blood breeds, the cultivators of the soaring dragon realm are urgently setting up a large formation under Jianghu. In this way, even if the blood breeds appear again, they will be walking right into the trap. The blood breeds were indeed powerful, but if the soaring dragon realm was properly prepared, however many of them dared to come, they would all die. Once a formation was properly set up, the power it could unleash was extremely impressive. However, that was all. The only thing the cultivators of the soaring dragon realm could do now was to deal with the blood breeds. They had no way to deal with the blood realm. The saddest thing in the world was this. They clearly knew that a guillotine was hanging above their heads, slowly falling, but no one could stop it. When the guillotine fell one day, the soaring dragon realm would definitely be reduced to ashes, and the living beings of this realm would no longer exist. That would be a true disaster that would destroy the realm. After listening to Huang Liang's explanation, Lu Yi flicked his finger and a jade scroll flew out. I've sorted out some things about formations. I hope it will be of some help to all of you. Huang Liang was startled, and immediately revealed an expression of admiration. He bowed to Lu Yi and said, "Thank you, little friend." He sighed in his heart. As expected of the savior of the world. He was already in such a state, yet he was still thinking about the soaring dragon realm. Such breadth of mind really made him admire him. Huang Liang had already heard about how profound Lu Yi's attainments and formations were from his own formation cultivators. The things that Lu Yi had sorted out would undoubtedly be of great use. Sect Master Huang, please go ahead. Lu Yi waved his hand weakly. Huang Liang nodded and said, "I'll come back to visit you later." Huang Liang left with a look of regret, lamenting that the heavens were jealous of geniuses. Yi was still sobbing. Lu Yi rubbed her head, silently comforting her. Suddenly, Yi seemed to have thought of something. She raised her head and said, "Lu Yi, let's go back to the 9 prefectures." The fairy doctor and the entire soaring dragon realm were helpless in Lu Yi's current situation, but it did not mean that no one in the 9 prefectures could cure him. No matter what, there were divine ocean realm cultivators in the 9 prefectures. Their cultivation level was much higher than that of the soaring dragon realm. Perhaps the divine ocean realm cultivators could resolve the symptoms that the fairy doctor was helpless in? Lu Yi shook his head and said, "We can't go back." If he could think of going back to the 9 prefectures to think of a solution, how could he not? But, how could he return to the 9 prefectures? In the secret realm of the celestial origin city, he was sent out by the city lord. In the secret realm of the realm of beasts, after the crisis of the entire realm of beasts was resolved, a passage to the Cloud River battlefield appeared at the military supply office. What about the secret realm of the soaring dragon realm? Not to mention whether there was a place like the military supply office. Even if there was, it was impossible to return to the 9 prefectures before the crisis of the soaring dragon realm was completely resolved. This was also the fundamental reason why he did not hesitate to use the Dragon Emperor, even though he knew that it was extremely dangerous. He was not the kind of person who could casually care about the world, nor was he the kind of unparalleled righteous person who was willing to die for others. From the beginning to the end he was clear about one thing. When he entered the soaring dragon realm, he lived and died with this realm. If he wanted to live, he had to protect the soaring dragon realm first. Unfortunately, even if he fought with his life on the line, he could only delay the destruction of the soaring dragon realm, and could not cure the disaster facing this realm. Perhaps after the problem of this realm was truly resolved, there would be a passage that would allow him to leave this realm, but before that, he could not return to the 9 prefectures. The situation of the soaring dragon realm was not the same as that of the realm of beasts. In the realm of beasts, many cultivators of the 9 prefectures entered, and they could join forces and work together. But here he was alone, and there was no room for cooperation or discussion with other cultivators. Then what should we do? Yi was a little out of her wits. Seeing Lu Yi in such a state, her heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, but there was nothing she could do. She secretly hated herself for not having any talent in the path of medical cultivation. If she had chosen the path of medical cultivation back then, she would have been able to help Lu Yi a lot more. In the beginning, she actually wanted to walk the path of medical cultivation. She also learned from her second senior sister Shui Yuan for a long time, but she did not show any special talent. Instead, she walked smoothly on the path of magical cultivation. 7017K. Chapter 735. Looking back now, Yi regretted not persevering on the path of medical cultivation. However, the path of cultivation was not easy to change, especially now that she was a cultivator of the Cloud River tier. At most, she could only cultivate medical cultivation. She secretly made up her mind that if she could return alive this time, she would definitely consult her second senior sister about medical cultivation. Where's Lioli? Lu Yi turned around but did not see Yi Lioli's figure. Yi shook her head, indicating that she did not know. She was in grief and did not have the energy to care about anything else. Inside the straw hut, the fairy doctor was preparing medicinal herbs when Yi Lioli stepped in. As if she had expected this, the fairy doctor did not even raise her head. You're awake. Her words were strange because Yi Lioli did not wake up from a dream or a coma. Elder sister, Yi Lioli softly called out. If Lu Yi heard this, she would definitely be surprised. Because ever since they came to the Medicine Valley, Yi Lioli and Yi had called the fairy doctor senior, so this elder sister was undoubtedly very abrupt. What was even stranger was that the fairy doctor did not have any abnormal reaction to this. Thank you for taking me in and taking care of me, elder sister. If not for you, I might have dissipated long ago, and it would be impossible for me to gain intelligence. As she spoke, Yi Lioli gracefully bowed to the fairy doctor. The fairy doctor's hands did not stop moving, and her gentle voice sounded. We're in the same boat, no need to thank me. You've already made your decision? Yi Lioli nodded. Sixth brother, he did very well. He's the person I've been waiting for. He will definitely succeed. The fairy doctor sighed. I hope your obsession can be resolved. I will. Yi Lioli nodded heavily. Go. Yi Lioli prostrated on the ground and respectfully kowtowed to the fairy doctor. She stood up and smiled. Elder sister, take care. When she turned around, it was an eternal farewell. Looking in the direction of the door, the fairy doctor was silent for a long time. The disappointment in her heart eventually turned into a sigh. In the straw hut, Lu Yi was lying on the bed and Yi Lioli was feeding him medicine. Thanks to Lu Ye's attack that borrowed the power of heaven and earth, cutting into the ravine and weakening the blood realm's attachment to the soaring dragon realm, Yi Lioli's condition also rapidly improved after the bloody battle at the ravine. Her old illness showed no signs of flaring up. I'll do it myself. Lu Yi wasn't used to being served like this. Yi Lioli pursed her lips and chuckled. In the past, it was sixth brother who took care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of sixth brother. This is called. She pondered for a moment. Reciprocity demands reciprocity. Yi, who was at the side, was amused. Lu Yi could not help but laugh as well. He left without saying goodbye to anyone. That day, Yi Lioli and Yi Lioli quietly left the Medicine Valley with Lu Yi. They set off from the extreme north and headed south. This was because Yi Lioli said that the south of the dragon soaring realm was a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters. It was a place full of outstanding people and the scenery was the most beautiful. A group of 2 people, 1 spirit and 1 tiger, left the Medicine Valley like thieves. In the following days the group was not in a hurry. They entered the most prosperous city at every place they arrived at and saw the most beautiful scenery. Along the way they left behind extremely beautiful memories. In order to make it easier for Lu Yi to travel, Yi Lioli and Yi Lioli personally built a wheelchair for him. When they arrived at the bustling city they pushed him forward, looking at the various states of the world and experiencing the warmth and coldness of the world. The bloody battle at Jianghu previously had a huge impact on the cultivation world of the dragon soaring realm, but it didn't have much of an impact on those mortals. Although many mortals had heard some things, those things were too far away from them, and it wasn't something they could interfere with. Their life and death depended entirely on the efforts of the cultivators. If the cultivators of the dragon soaring realm could succeed, they could live. If the cultivators of the dragon soaring realm failed, they could only be at the mercy of the cultivators. It could be said that this was a kind of sorrow, but sometimes ignorance was also a kind of blessing. Lu Ye's mood was unprecedentedly calm. Since leaving the Medicine Valley, he had never thought about cultivation again. As a result, he felt that his state of mind had improved a lot. Correspondingly, his body's condition was slowly deteriorating. Just as the fairy doctor said, the world had its source and so did people. His source was too weak, so no matter what method he used, it was difficult to replenish it. The deterioration of his body gradually made him a little drowsy, and he often inexplicably fell asleep. Occasionally when he woke up, he could hear Yi Liuli's suppressed sobs. Once again in the Feng province, in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, Yi Liuli pushed Lu Ye's wheelchair, walking in the familiar environment. Although it hadn't been long, this once famous mountain villa had become dilapidated. The night was enchanting. On the small island in the center of the Saber Lake, Yi Liuli opened her arms, as if to embrace the entire starry sky. Her cheerful voice rang out. "Sixth brother, do you still remember what happened when you were young?" "What happened?" Lu Yi asked. How could he remember what happened when he was young? After coming to this realm, the information he had obtained was actually very limited. "You, big brother and second brother, stole an ancient scroll from father. I don't know what was recorded in it, but father found out and then hung you here to be beaten." Lu Yi imagined that scene and his eyes couldn't help but twitch. There was such a thing? Yi Liuli chuckled. "I brought you food and big brother and second brother both ate it. Only you were stubborn and didn't eat a single bite. In the end you fainted from hunger. Father was quite frightened and since then he hasn't been harsh on you." Lu Yi quietly listened. He had never experienced the feelings of siblings before, and now that he heard Yi Liuli's story and imagined that scene, he felt that it was quite interesting. "Sixth brother, what was recorded in that ancient scroll?" Yi Liuli asked. "I didn't read it so I don't know." Lu Yi shook his head, speaking the truth. "All right." Yi Liuli didn't ask any more questions. She raised her hand and gently stroked it, her voice becoming calm. "The wind is blowing." There was a murderous aura in the wind. In the darkness, figures gathered from all directions and surrounded the island in an instant. Lu Ye's expression was calm, Yi's expression was indifferent, and even Yi Liuli didn't panic in the slightest. When the leader of the group saw this, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He instinctively felt that something was wrong, but things had already come to this point and there was no turning back. "Xiong Taizhan?" Lu Yi looked at the burly man and immediately understood who had come. Xiong Taizhan, the leader of the Divine Will sect. He was also the one who killed Ying. The battle under the ravine swept the entire cultivation world of Dragon Ascension, and no sect was spared. Naturally, the Divine Will sect also participated. In that battle, the Divine Will sect suffered heavy losses, and was almost completely annihilated by the blood breeds. Xiong Taizhan was lucky to survive. These days he had been on tenterhooks because he recognized Lu Ye's identity. This young man who shone brightly on the battlefield, and could even be said to have saved the entire Dragon Ascension realm with his own strength, was actually Yi Ying's sixth son. How could this be? He and Yi Lu had a blood feud, and this hatred couldn't be erased. After that battle, Yi Lu had shockingly become the savior of Soaring Dragon, and was even an esteemed guest of the three overlord sections. If such a character wanted to kill him, Xiong Taishan, it would only be a matter of moving his mouth. Xiong Taishan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. More than once he wanted to strike first to gain the upper hand and kill Lu Yi. However, cultivators came and went from the Medicine Valley, so it wasn't convenient for him to make a move. Who would have thought that Lu Yi actually left the Medicine Valley quietly, and didn't hide his whereabouts, which gave him an opportunity to take advantage of. He gathered a group of people and followed them all the way here and he couldn't hold back anymore. "That's me, Xiong Taizhan." Xiong Taizhan didn't intend to hide his identity, and openly admitted it. His eyes were like an eagle's as he stared at Lu Yi. "Yi Lu, hand over the Dragon Emperor." 7017K. Chapter 736. Killing Lu Yi was to get rid of the hidden danger and obtain the Dragon Emperor. Otherwise, once the news of Lu Ye's death spread, he wouldn't be able to pass the three overlord sects test. The might of the Dragon Emperor was already deeply ingrained in people's hearts. That earth-shattering blade was a height that the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm could never reach in their lifetime. Therefore, even if the danger of the Dragon Emperor spread along with the news of Lu Ye's heavy injuries, it still couldn't stop some people from coveting it. Xiong Taizhan was like this, and so were the cultivators he was entangled with. With the Dragon Emperor in hand, he couldn't command the three overlord sects, but at least in the entire soaring dragon realm, no one would dare to threaten his safety. You want it? Under the night sky, Lu Ye's eyelids drooped slightly and his voice became low. Then he flicked his finger, take it yourself. Along with the flick of his finger, a blood-red ray of light shot out. The ray of light spun and landed in front of Xiong Taizhan, stabbing into the ground with a hiss, only revealing the top part. Dragon Spine Saber. Xiong Taizhan was dumbfounded. He never thought that Lu Yi would have such a reaction. Looking at his posture, it was clear that he would give it to him as long as he wanted it. For a moment, Xiong Taizhan was bewildered. He didn't know what Lu Yi was doing. On the contrary, many of the people he brought looked at the huge saber hilt on the ground with fervent expressions. The Dragon Spine Saber was a long saber used by Long Wankai. Long Wankai was 3 feet tall, and the Dragon Spine Saber was 16 feet long. Just the hilt alone was more than 3 feet long. This was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could wield with their physical body. Therefore, although they were fervent, no one rashly went up to attack. Who knew if there was a trick in this? Yi Lu, what do you want to do? Xiong Taizhan gritted his teeth and asked, but he was somewhat cowardly at heart. Lu Yi slowly shook his head, a look of disappointment on his face. There's nothing wrong with being cautious. But for someone like you, even if your cultivation is high, you won't be able to enter the Hall of Elegance. Xiong Taizhan was a little embarrassed and angry. He was about to retort, but Yi Lioli had already pushed the wheelchair forward under Lu Ye's instructions. One of them had lost his source and was heavily injured and on the verge of death. The other was completely unharmed and had a strong body. However, as the wheelchair slowly approached, it was actually a mighty iron mountain that was pushed back. In front of the Dragon Spine Saber, Lu Yi stretched out his hand and grabbed the saber hilt. An abnormal dark red color flashed across his face. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he pulled the blood-stained saber out from the ground. Even if I gave it to you, you wouldn't dare to take it. Why bother looking for me? When Lu Yi had decided to bring Yi Lioli north to seek medical treatment, he had already given up on seeking revenge on the Divine Will sect. Firstly, he wasn't the real 6th Yi. Secondly, this was Yi Lioli's wish. She was afraid that her only 6th brother would meet with an accident in the process of seeking revenge. To the Yi Lioli back then, as long as 6th brother was by her side, revenge was no longer important. Therefore, Lu Yi had never thought of finding trouble with Xiong Taizhan. If he hadn't appeared in front of him today, he wouldn't have even paid attention to him. Thank you for your trouble, senior. Lu Yi said softly and put away the Dragon Spine Saber. What are you talking about? Xiong Taizhan's heart couldn't help but tighten when he heard this strange sentence. Go ahead, little friend. I'll take care of the rest. A voice that made Xiong Taizhan and his companions' expressions change drastically suddenly rang out. As the voice rang out, a figure suddenly entered the field. The person wore a silk headscarf and a green robe. Although he was dressed like a scholar, his figure was as straight as a sword and his eyes were as sharp as a blade. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a faint flicker of sword light. Yuan Changsuan. Xiong Taizhan's expression changed drastically. The rest of the cultivators who came with him also looked terrified. When they turned their heads and looked around, their hearts and minds turned cold. Yuan Changsuan hadn't come alone. At some point there were more people around him. They had originally surrounded Lu Yi, but now they were surrounded by others. Based on their strength, it was reasonable to say that such a thing shouldn't have happened. However, when Lu Yi took out the Dragon Spine Saber and casually threw it, their minds were completely distracted and their perception of the outside world became extremely weak. It was at that time that Yuan Changsuan's men took advantage of the situation. Is this a trap? Xiong Taizhan obviously misunderstood something. He thought that Lu Yi didn't hesitate to leave the Medicine Valley to use himself as bait to lure out those with bad intentions. He didn't know that when Lu Yi was in the Medicine Valley, there were many experts from the 3 overlord sects secretly guarding outside the straw hut. This was because Huang Liang knew that people's hearts were unpredictable. Even a savior like Lu Yi couldn't guarantee that no one would harbor evil intentions in the face of the great temptation of the Dragon Emperor. Previously, there were many cultivators going in and out of the Medicine Valley, but only a few people were qualified to set foot in the straw hut. Lu Yi seemed to have left the Medicine Valley secretly, but in fact, with his seriously injured body and Yi Lioli's methods, How could he hide from Huang Liang and the others? No one stopped him because there was no need to. A savior who was about to die, whose last wish was to see the great rivers and mountains that he had protected with his life. Who could stop him? Who had the heart to stop him? However, the three overlord sects had never relaxed their secret protection of Lu Yi, and Yuan Changsuan, the master of Haoran Academy, had personally followed him secretly. They thought that Lu Yi didn't notice all this. But in fact, Lu Yi had already seen through them. Under the night sky, the wheelchair gradually moved away and was gradually swallowed by the darkness. From beginning to end, Xiong Taishan and the others didn't dare to act rashly. Although he was also in the Cloud River Realm Ninth Order, in front of a top master like Yuan Changsuan, there was no comparison. A trap. Yuan Changsuan's face was cold. You think too highly of yourselves. Waving his hand lightly, a word more chilling than the cold wind came out of his mouth. Kill. Sword lights flashed and crisscrossed, breaking the tranquility of the island and instantly filling the air with the smell of blood. The world is so stupid. Yuan Changsuan felt sad. A few days ago the Soaring Dragon sect had just recovered from the crisis of being wiped out, but in the face of a savior like Lu Yi, not only did they not feel grateful, there were actually people who dared to have ideas about him. Even if he was the master of Haoran Academy, he really couldn't understand how there could be such an ungrateful person in this world. Fortunately, there weren't many people with such ulterior motives, so Yang Kai had taken this opportunity to completely eradicate them. In the future, no one should have any ideas about Lu Yi. Looking in the direction Lu Yi left, Yuan Changsuan sighed in his heart, hoping that this little friend could live out the rest of his days in peace. Leaving tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, the group set off in the direction of Hua Yen Mountain. This was the beginning of Lu Ye's entry into this world. Whether it was a coincidence or not, it was actually going to be the end. Hua Yen Mountain's Wangyang Peak was the highest peak in the entire Hua Yen Mountain range. Halfway up the mountain, a sea of clouds rolled about. Atop the peak, the group stopped and looked towards the east. As the sun rose, its light sprinkled down. Sitting in his wheelchair, Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked at the rising sun, feeling some regret and nostalgia in his heart. Yi also obviously felt something and squatted beside Lu Yi, her small face pressed against his hand. There was no fear or sadness in her eyes, just quietly staring at Lu Yi, as if she wanted to imprint his face into the depths of her soul forever. Shi Hupe and Lu Yi depended on each other in life and death. If Lu Yi died, the two of them wouldn't be able to live alone. Liuli, Lu Yi softly called out. The girl on the side sobbed in response. Sixth brother can only accompany you up to this point. You have to walk the rest of the way on your own. Yi Liuli silently turned her head, but she was already sobbing. Separation in life and death, no matter when and where, was the most painful thing. She kept shaking her head as if she couldn't accept such a cruel fact. Lu Yi was about to open his mouth to comfort her, but Liuli had already squatted down and grabbed his hand. Sixth brother. Liuli is very lucky to have sixth brother by my side. Sixth brother, I've waited for you for many years, I can't hold on much longer. Hearing these confusing words, Lu Ye's face was filled with astonishment, but this astonishment quickly turned into shock. Yi also clearly sensed something and straightened her upper body, staring at Yi Liuli in a daze. Hupa also widened his tiger eyes. In those deep tiger eyes, there was a reflection of a body that was glowing. It was as if her entire body was burning, but the flames that enveloped her didn't cause any discomfort. Instead, it was very warm. The flames spread out, enveloping Lu Yi completely. The next moment, Lu Ye's eyes were filled with disbelief, because an extremely gentle power flowed into his body through Yi Liuli's palm. That power quickly replenished the origin energy he had lost from using the Dragon Emperor. It was like rain after a long drought, like an old tree sprouting new branches. Lu Yi could clearly sense that his body was undergoing some kind of earth-shattering transformation that he didn't understand. In these days, his appearance had gradually aged. He was clearly not even 20 years old, but if someone who didn't know him saw him, they would probably think he was 40 or 50 years old. Even his hair had turned snow white. And now, the traces of time on his face were rapidly disappearing, and his snow-white hair had turned black again. His entire person was like the rising sun above the sea of clouds, once again full of vitality. Yi covered her mouth with her hand, completely unable to understand what was happening. Lu Yi also didn't understand. He never knew that Yi Liuli had such an ability. And as that inexplicable power flowed into Yi Liuli's body, Lu Yi suddenly felt as if this world had become incomparably close to him. Faintly he had a clear insight. Lioli, what are you doing? Lu Yi asked in shock. Although the changes that were happening to his body were unimaginable, he could feel that Yi Lioli had paid an extremely heavy price. His origin energy was in deficit, and even the little fairy doctor was helpless. How could Yi Lioli replenish it? There was no way to explain what he was experiencing. 7017K. Chapter 737. An indescribable grief enveloped Lu Ye's body and mind. It felt as if he was about to lose something extremely important. This feeling didn't come from his heart, but from his identity as Sixth Yi. He wanted to pull his hand away but he couldn't. Yi Lioli didn't use much strength to hold his hand, but their palms were tightly intertwined. Let go. Yi Lioli looked up at him, her small face full of tears, but she only shook her head gently, a smile on her face. Sixth brother, I can't hold on anymore. I'm very glad that I was able to wait for you. This is the last thing I can do for you. Sixth brother, you still have a long way to go. The flames enveloping the two of them slowly receded and gradually disappeared. As the flames dissipated, Yi Lioli's entire body became illusory and transparent. She got up and slowly turned around, looking at the rising sun. She sighed softly, full of nostalgia. The clothes on her upper body gently slid down, revealing a translucent and smooth back. Lu Yi looked up and narrowed her eyes. She saw that the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back had changed a little. At first glance, this birthmark looked like a centipede that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Its appearance and shape were exactly the same as the heavenly ravine in the extreme north. It was just that the size was different. But at this moment, there were many mysterious patterns around the birthmark. These patterns were in accordance with the laws of nature, and when Lu Yi looked at them, he was greatly moved. This is. Lu Yi faintly saw through them. Yi Lioli's soft voice sounded. I believe that with Sixth Brother's ability, you should be able to do it. She suddenly turned her head and smiled. Sixth Brother, thank you. As her words fell, her originally somewhat illusory body quickly became transparent, then turned into specks of light, floating between heaven and earth. Lu Yi took a step forward and reached out to grab her, but he grabbed nothing but air, leaving behind only her clothes that still had some residual warmth. Lioli. He also cried out in shock. Ever since Yi Lioli's body had undergone all kinds of strange changes, she had been at a loss. She had never thought that this little girl, who had been by Lu Ye's and her side ever since they entered the dragon soaring realm, would disappear from the world in such a way. What's going on with Lioli? What's going on? Yi turned to look at Lu Yi, her eyes suddenly widening in disbelief. Lu Yi, you? The Lu Yi in his field of vision was no longer as old and feeble as before. Now he was full of vitality, and his white hair had turned back to black. His condition was better than ever. Just now, the flames had enveloped Lu Yi and Yi Lioli, so Yi hadn't been able to clearly see what had happened inside. After that, she had been distracted by Yi Lioli's various abnormalities, causing her to not notice the changes in Lu Yi. Until now, Lu Yi, have you recovered? Yi's voice trembled, afraid that what she saw was just an illusion. Yi Lioli's disappearance filled her heart with grief, but Lu Ye's sudden recovery filled her heart with joy. The two conflicting emotions collided in her heart, and for a moment, sorrow and joy surged up together, making it hard for Yi to control herself. Most of them were puzzled. Even the little fairy doctor was helpless against Lu Ye's situation. Who in this world could save Lu Yi? Although she had previously suggested for Lu Yi to find a way to return to the 9 provinces, she knew that with Lu Ye's situation, even if he really did return to the 9 provinces, the situation wouldn't be too optimistic. The huge deficit of one's origin was not something that could be solved with a high cultivation level. Recalling the various changes that had happened before, how could he not understand that Lu Ye's recovery was directly related to Yi Lioli's disappearance? She had all kinds of questions in her mind, but this was clearly not the time to ask. On Wangyang Peak, Lu Yi was holding the last proof of Yi Lioli's existence in this world. He never would have thought that this little girl who had always called him Sixth Brother would have such an unimaginable nature. He had never noticed this. It wasn't until Yi Lioli held his hand and channeled her gentle energy into his body to replenish his depleted source energy that he suddenly woke up from his stupor. Because along with that gentle power came many indescribable mysteries. Yi Lioli was not just the 7th princess of the tyrannical Saber Villa, nor was she Sixth Brother Ye's younger sister. Her other identity was the carrier of the will of the heavens and earth. No wonder the birthmark on Yi Liuli's back was exactly the same shape as the Sky Ravine. No wonder every time something happened at the Sky Ravine, it could be perfectly reflected on Yi Liuli's body. Because she was the carrier of the will of the dragon soaring realm. Many things that he could not understand in the past were explained at this moment. Because he had activated the Dragon Emperor, his origin was in a huge deficit. Not to mention that the fairy doctor was helpless about this condition. Even if he really returned to the 9 states, no one would be able to save him. This was also the reason why he did not try to return to the 9 states. Because even if he really did return, it would only make second senior sister and the sect master sad. The only thing that could save him was the power of the same origin. For example, the origin of this world. The last of the origin of this world was sent into Lu Ye's body through Yi Liuli's hands, filling up his deficit and allowing Lu Yi to come back to life. Looking at it now, when Yi Liuli suggested leaving the Medicine Valley and going out to take a look, it was not for Lu Yi but for herself. She had already made this plan long ago, and also knew that she did not have much time left. So she wanted to see the great rivers and mountains of this world before she left. In the end she stopped here, unable to do her best. On the peak, the sun had already completely risen. Those intimate words of sixth brother seemed to still echo in her ears, but the petite figure that followed behind her like a shadow was no longer there. It turned out that she was going to travel alone next. "It's me." Lu Yi carefully kept Yi Liuli's clothes and called softly, "Yi, return to the Medicine Valley." Yi responded with a grunt. After a while, a stream of light set off from the sun-gazing peak, heading straight in the direction of the Medicine Valley. Along the way, Lu Yi told Yi everything he knew about Yi Liuli. There was no need for any secrets between the two of them. Compared to her, during this period of time in the dragon soaring realm, Yi was the one who spent the most time with Yi Liuli. The two girls who were about the same age already had extremely deep feelings for each other. "Liuli is the carrier of the will of this world, then is she still Liuli?" Yi asked in a choked voice. "She is naturally her." The cultivators of the dragon soaring realm did not know about the blood realm and the blood tribe before, but the will of this world should have known long ago. However, the will of this world is not a living creature and does not have many thoughts and ideas. It only instinctively reacted when it sensed danger, so it carried its will on Yi Liuli and was born with her. When Lu Yi swung that shocking saber at the bottom of the ravine, he clearly felt that this world had its own will. However, that will might not be clear, and was only in a hazy state, unable to make some judgments as clearly as a human. However, after choosing Yi Liuli as a carrier, and after being born and growing with her, Yi Liuli could do these things. For example, expending everything she had to save Lu Yi. Hence Yi Liuli was Yi Liuli. Even if she carried the will of this world, her existence could not be denied. However, Lu Yi did not understand why Yi Liuli was chosen. This was the first time he had come into contact with such profound and mysterious things. In the end he was only a mere Cloud River tier cultivator. Also, before Yi Liuli left, she said something that Lu Yi was very concerned about. She said that she had already waited for many years and could not hold on much longer. Lu Yi had some vague guesses but no one could explain them to him, and he could not help but feel regret. After hearing this, Yi's heart was filled with gratitude toward Yi Liuli, and there was also a lot of reluctance toward this little friend that she had not known for long. However, Yi Liuli had already made her choice and the past was the past. In the medicinal valley, Huang Liang and Yuan Changxuan stood side by side, looking in the direction of the ravine. Yuan Changxuan recounted the events of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, and Huang Liang's face was filled with anger as he listened. He gritted his teeth and said, "This bunch of ignorant things, they really deserve to die." They had been saved from the calamity of destruction, and their lives had been preserved. Not only did they not feel gratitude, they actually wanted to attack Lu Yi and seize the Dragon Emperor. Even if he had long known that people were unfathomable, when such a thing really happened, he could not help but feel angry. In this world there were indeed many ingrates who did not have the right to live. Little friend Yi has suffered. Huang Liang sighed slowly. There is an end to suffering. Little friend should be free now. When he was in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, he had observed Lu Ye's vitality. It was simply a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. In his opinion, Lu Yi might not even be able to last a night in his situation. Now that 3 or 4 days had passed, Lu Yi was definitely no longer alive. Huang Liang's expression darkened when he heard this. In the end, I, Soaring Dragon, have let him down. If we can survive this great calamity, We will erect a monument for him so that future generations will remember little friend Ye's sacrifice for the world. Of course, Yuan Changsuan had no objection to this. The word, savior, had always only existed in legends. No one would have thought that one would appear in this era. It was a pity that this savior would not live long in the end. A stream of light rapidly approached from afar. Huang Liang and Yuan Changsuan did not pay much attention to it. There were many cultivators coming and going in the medicinal valley during this period of time, and they only thought that it was some cultivator returning from the ravine. After a hurried glance, the two of them were suddenly stunned, and they turned their heads again to look at the stream of light. Huang Liang's eyes widened, and his face was full of disbelief. Yuan Changsuan, a successful sword cultivator, also opened his mouth slightly, and the sound of a sword humming faintly came from his body, showing that his heart was not calm. The stream of light arrived in front of them in an instant, and the light dissipated, revealing two figures. Lu Yi stepped forward and saluted, "Greetings, seniors." Huang Liang pointed at Lu Yi. You, he almost blurted out, "You're not dead?" He finally realized that it was not very polite to say that, but the shock in his heart made him unable to speak a complete sentence. 7017K. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.